Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Broke the Soulmate System? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Quirks are unique to everyone in the world. Compares. Everyone started showing their quirks, or lack of quirk, at the same age, and with it came the opportunity to find your soulmate, the one person in the entire world that shared your quirk completely. It may seem blissful, but for those without quirks, that meant there was no soulmate waiting for you. How could you find your soulmate when the only indicator was gone? Imagine the disappointment when you reached 4 years old, then 5, then 6. It didn't set in until then that you were truly quirkless and couldn't reach for that happiness that so many others seem to have. It wasn't the end of the world. Of course, quirkless people dated amongst themselves. But what was the point? You couldn't see it. So, you went through your life, working hard to attain good grades and achieve some sort of happiness in your life, since you couldn't count on the universe to just hand it to you. No, you'd have to work harder than anyone else for that. You planned to attend UA's general department, then hopefully get a cushy job somewhere that paid enough money to buy yourself that happiness. But that was a long way off, and you still woke up every morning to see your soulmate parents kiss each other at the door. You still rode the train seeing people holding hands and sharing smiles. You still went to school and averted your eyes when you saw students with similar quirks goofing around. You settled into this life. Really got yourself ingrained into the idea that this would be your future. When you made it into the UA entrance exams and futilely stumbled through the practical exam, you weren't expecting much. Your grades would get you into the general studies course. That's all you needed. So, imagine the surprise and absolute terror when you were picked up by a robot and held at its eye level, and one of your weak punches sailed through the air at its glowing eye light. And the world seemed to explode around you. Vaguely, you noticed the violet lines that striped up your arm and under your sleeve, and along those lines were white-hot streaks of agony. In that split second, you could feel the bones of your arm shatter. It was unsettling, but you couldn't dwell on it because you were suddenly falling. You hit the ground hard, your arm in the worst pain you'd ever felt in your life. Turning your head to the side, you could see the robot had fallen backward, a crater where its eye had once been. Had you done that? There's no possible way. You hadn't done any physical training. None of your other weak attacks had even scratched the smaller robots. It was the last thought you had before you finally blacked out from the pain of your shattered arm being pressed under your prone body. There's no doubt about it. That was one for all. I think you're right, All Might. The injuries and situation are too similar to Midoriya's to be anything but that. You really didn't think about the repercussions of giving him your quirk. He was quirkless. I didn't think he had a soulmate. Can you blame me? No, I suppose I can't. Your eyes slowly opened to look at the blinding white of the ceiling, and you let out a quiet groan. The curtains pulled back to reveal an elderly woman with a smile on her face. Good, you're awake. How are you feeling, dear? Exhausted. That's to be expected. My quirk may be able to heal, but it uses your body's energy to do it. Your arm was in pretty rough shape, but if you leave it in the wrapping and sling, you'll be good as new by morning. I heard you say All Might. Is he here? You struggled to get the words out as you swung your legs over the side of the bed and sat up. The dizziness took over you for a moment, and the woman hesitated before answering. No, he left a few moments ago. His secretary is here, however. Before we send you home, there are some things we need to speak to you about. We'll have to wait for Midoriya to wake up too. What did Midoriya have to do with you? Who even was that? You didn't have it in you to argue, and the elderly woman nodded and offered you a few hard candies to eat while you waited. As you started to gather your thoughts, you recognized her as Recovery Girl, one of the leading healing heroes operating today. No wonder your arm felt leaps and bounds better. Actually, Recovery Girl, I think we should speak to them about this now, while Midoriya is still asleep. I'm sure his reactions may make it harder for them to take in. Recovery Girl looked over her shoulder at a man that poked his head through the curtains. He was blond and tall, but thin as a rail. Still, something about him seemed familiar, but you couldn't quite place it. Maybe you'd seen him at some point in the entrance exam. Recovery Girl agreed with his statement with a sigh, and he stepped into the curtains without a sound. You're registered as Quirkless, are you not? That's true. I have doctor's confirmation. So is young Midoriya. The man pulled the curtain to the side enough to show you the other bed. With both arms wrapped to his chest was a male, his hair a shock of green against the stark white of the bedsheets. He is also registered as Quirkless, like you. This morning he received a quirk. From me. That's impossible. You can't transfer quirks. You tried to argue, but the blonde man shook his head. It is possible, but only for this specific quirk. It's called One for All. The man paused, and after a sharp look from Recovery Girl the room burst into smoke. After it cleared, you were floored to see All Might in the smaller man's place. Midoriya was given a quirk because he showed the potential and drive needed to chase his dream to become a hero. It's too powerful for him to use as he is now, though. And it seems it was too powerful for you too. You blinked at him openly, your heart stuttering for a moment before picking back up at an increased pace. What are you talking about? This is unprecedented, so we had no way of knowing, but it seems you and Midoriya are soulmates. Whether the bond has always been there, or if it manifested due to one of you obtaining a quirk, there's no way of telling. Still, the end result is the same. The two of you share One for All. Your eyes fell to Midoriya again, sleeping peacefully in his hospital bed. This was your soulmate. After all this time, this was your one. You'd never spoken to him before, but your heart reached out for him. Of course, it would. You tried to admonish yourself. You'd just been given hope, and now you were latching onto. No, you wouldn't let yourself get so excited over something so trivial. It hadn't mattered in your life before, and you wouldn't let it take over now. I suppose the question that remains is if you're intending on continuing your pursuit to the general studies course. If you move to the hero course, you could hone your quirk and learn to use it. No, you interrupted and turned your eyes to the ground and glared at the yellowing tiles. I'm going to keep moving forward like I always have. I'd like to continue into the general studies program, and I don't want to use this quirk again. You struggled to your feet and used your free hand to grab the bag that you noticed was in the chair next to your bed. It contained your usual clothes, but you'd walk home in your workout clothes if you had to. Anything to get out of here sooner, and away from the boy in the bed. If that's what you wish, it's not our place to convince you otherwise. However, if I were you, I'd avoid using the quirk altogether unless you want to suffer injuries like you did today. The power is much too great for an untrained body to handle. I won't, you promised, slinging your bag over your uninjured shoulder and turning to look at Midoriya's prone form once more. Your heart clenched at the mere thought of walking away from this, and the tightening of your fist seemed to alert All Might and Recovery Girl to your thoughts. Before you walk away, Recovery Girl interrupted, taking a step forward to stand next to you and share a look at Midoriya. It's easy to see that being quirkless your entire life has taken a toll on you, dear. You're not the only one. Keep in mind that Midoriya has been quirkless too. His whole life he's gone through the same feelings you have, believing he was truly alone. Now he's not, and neither are you. Your lower lip wobbled, telling of the feelings you wanted to let go. Instead of bursting into tears in the nurse's office, you turned on your heel and left the room. Time alone was what you needed, time that you would use to think about your new station in life, and what may come with it. Making this decision may have been easier if you knew what sort of person Midoriya was. Secretly, you hoped he was a real JRK, but All Might wouldn't give his own quirk to someone that wasn't completely worthy of following in his footsteps, right? On the other hand, you worried that he was an absolute angel and your resolve would crumble instantly when you realized you had no reason to push away someone wonderful. That was the thought that kept you up that night, and the nights afterward as you waited for your letter from Yue to come in the mail. You were confident in your success on the written exam, but your mother still paced at the mailbox every morning, waiting for the post to come. News of suddenly finding yourself with a quirk hadn't left your lips since you exited the nurse's office. You weren't a complete idiot, you knew that it must be some grave secret. Especially considering the state All Might was in before he transformed. Desperately, you wanted to push all of this from your mind and forget about it, but it was impossible when you were reminded every moment of the day by the thrumming that developed in your chest. Having one for all, is that what he called it? Having one for all felt like this force in your chest that rapidly took up residence in every nook and cranny that was available. Sometimes, you woke up at night in a panic because it was hard to breathe with such a weight on your chest. Whether that was from the quirk itself, or the fact that it was All Might's legacy. You weren't sure of the true reason. What you were sure of was that you needed to give extra attention to it. In your anger at opening a jar, you felt it thrum to life, begging you to use it. Without control over how much you used, you quickly slammed the lid down on your newfound quirk and locked it away. It happened more often than you liked, especially in moments that you were distracted and experienced any sort of emotional burst. With no way to contact All Might, you could only watch and wait as the quirk settled into your body, ready for you to reach out and grasp it with both hands. You never second-guessed your decision to forego the hero course. It wasn't something you were interested in, even with an apparently super powerful quirk that you had no clue how to properly use. The acceptance letter came and went, with instructions on how to pick up your school uniform, and even more XPLCT instructions that you needed to have your student ID on you at all times within UA grounds. Apparently, there was some security system that would only unlock for you if you had the card. School continued on, with some fanfare at your middle school for being a quirkless student that got into UA, and you appreciated the recognition for such an accomplishment. You had a small celebration on the weekend with a few of your close friends, then promptly started to study hard for your end-of-the-year exams. Just after exams, a week before UA started, you received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. When you pick it up, the gravelly voice of untransformed All Might greets you. Have you made any decisions? Of course, you haven't, because you've been neck-deep in tests and practical exams, busy tying up loose ends for UA, and just generally ignoring the fact that you have a soulmate out there right now. All Might doesn't like your negative answer, and a sigh comes from his end of the call. I won't push you, but I care quite a bit for young Midoriya. I won't tell him about this unless it's what you want, but if he asks, I'm going to. I think it best if you seek him out on the first day of classes and try to seek some common ground with him. He's a good kid, better than you're probably expecting. That doesn't make you feel any better, even though it should, because now you're thinking about the fact that you've settled so heavily into the thought of being alone and planned your goals around being an individual entity. Now there's a part 2 to your equation, one that you've been working out your entire life, and suddenly there's a lot more work to this than you wanted. With UA's gates looming ahead of you, you found yourself at a crossroads. Should you find Midoriya? It wouldn't be hard. All Might explained that he was in Class 1A of the Hero course. Maybe it was best saved for another day, when a multitude of other obligations weren't looming over your head, the main one being finding your classroom. That's what you decided on. Choosing your classroom over your soulmate. Thinking about it that way made your chest feel funny, maybe a bit guilty, but you brushed it off. You came first. You always would mind your goals first because they were there first. That's the only solution you had come up with in the weeks since your life twisted into this direction. In your classroom, you took your assigned seat and tried to ignore the obvious quirks of your classmates. To your right was one of the only students in class without some physical evidence of having a quirk, though it may be something subtle like the heavy bags under his eyes that turned to look at you when you stared a moment too long. You're that quirkless kid, right? Not often one of you gets in. One of you? You rankled a bit at his choice of words, but he only shrugged in response. But I guess that says something about you and that brain of yours. Hitoshi Shin's. After a moment of hesitation, his straightforward way of talking giving you pause, you returned with your own name and earned a nod in return. Shinso didn't say anything else after that, only turned forward and started to mess with his cell phone on his desk. You couldn't help but feel the whiplash from such a sudden interaction, but you filed it away for later as soon as your homeroom teacher entered the room. She introduced herself as Mitsuji Miseo, or better known as the Hero Grasp. Her appearance was rather ordinary, though a utility belt was around her waist and she had 2 bulky wristbands on her forearms that seemed to hold an unknown mechanism. Her no-nonsense attitude came out immediately and she quieted everyone down with a clapping noise that came from the air around her. We'll be going over the syllabus, then getting down to the assembly for all students. Let's not waste any time. Her quirk seemed to be some sort of levitation, maybe? But that wouldn't explain that clapping noise. You watched a stack of papers float back and forth through the rows for students to take their syllabus. When it got to you, you purposely overreached for the paper and your fingertips seemed to graze against what felt to be a hand, but nothing was visible. If Mitsuji noticed, she said nothing as she wrote on the chalkboard. You'd have to do some research on your own, then. After the assembly, which went over the upcoming events for the school year and a few other major topics, school was released for the day. Everyone filtered out of the auditorium in a surprisingly ordered fashion, with your class returning to the room to retrieve your belongings. Honestly, you'd expected a bit more out of a school like UA for the first day. But really it felt like any of your other introductory school days. It was comforting, actually. Your mom would be disappointed that you didn't really make any friends today, but you had 3 years to do that, so who was rushing? Instead, you made your way to your locker on your own and swapped your school shoes out for your street shoes, then swung your backpack over your shoulders and headed out to the front entrance of the school. It was starting to empty out, since you were dragging your feet a bit, so it felt less suffocating to be able to leisurely walk down the path to the gates without dodging and weaving through other students. In your pocket, your phone buzzed and you stopped in your tracks to pull it out and read it. The name made your body tense, but you opened it nonetheless. You didn't need him coming to find you in person. Did you talk to him? No, of course you didn't. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe in a week. Maybe never. You didn't type any of this out, and instead you sent him a thumbs down emoji as a response. The notification for his typing came up instantaneously, and he sent you an emoji with a straight line for the mouth. If someone told you 6 months ago that All Might of all people was trying to play as your wingman, you'd have laughed them right out of Mizudafu. I was a bit concerned by Aizawa-sensei's approach to class. But I trust the school's judgment. UA is the top program. Even so, lying is downright immoral. That voice was close, and you turned over your shoulder to apologize and step out of the way, but your blood ran cold. Obviously, those words came from the taller boy whose arms were crossed as he sported a serious look. Next to him was the last person you wanted to see today, Midoriya. His eyes looked to you once, and when he realized you were staring, his cheeks started to flush pink and he looked at you with the smallest smile. Your heart clenched at the sight, and you knew you were in trouble. Like it was made of paper, your resolve crumbled instantly. Just looking at this guy made your blood race, and as much as you wanted to say you hated it and hated him, you couldn't. Not when he was looking at you like that without even knowing who you truly were. You wondered how that expression would change if you blurted the truth out now. Would he be happy? Were you what he expected? Did the thought of gaining a soulmate with receiving his quirk even cross his mind? In the end, as much as you wanted to see those shifts on his face, you stepped to the side and let the two boys pass by. Further down the path, they were joined by a brown-haired girl, then the three of them left together. You held your phone clutched in your fist, and after a moment of hesitation you opened the messenger app again to respond to All Might. Soon, I promise. You hadn't really gone out of your way to make friends with anybody, but Shinso took the reins on that and you suddenly found yourself eating together at lunch and talking between class PRDS. You learned of his quirk and his dreams to make it into the hero course. At first, he accused you of being competition, but you assured him that the last thing you wanted was to transfer. In your mind, you also dreaded ever using the god-awful quirk you'd been given. Maybe if you honed it, it wouldn't break your body, but that meant you would have to break it to learn not to. Being a hero wasn't on your to-do list, and it never would be. Most of your day was dominated by different classes like English and history. You received a short break in the morning, then an hour break for lunch. Lunch was served in the large cafeteria, and the spread was absolutely amazing. It was on your third day of school that you were sitting at your table with Shinso, talking about some upcoming exam. Out of the corner of your eye, like it was haunting you, was a splotch of green that you had memorized thoroughly. It seemed like any chance possible, Midoriya was in your line of sight. Shinso had commented on it before, but you waved it off saying that you just thought he was cute. No need to tell him the whole convoluted story. You know he's not quirkless, right? You lifted your eyes to look at Shinso sharply, but he wasn't looking at you in return. Instead, his gaze was trained on what you assumed to be Midoriya off to your right. You opened your mouth to answer, But Shinso leveled you with a serious look. If you've got a crush, it's best to just forget about it. Out there in the world, Midoriya has a soulmate that he'll inevitably pick once he finds them. Even if he did like you back, that's just the way it would end up. Any words you had tried to form left your mouth as nothing more than a long exhale. Shinso's words made sense, except he didn't know the whole story. Really, you couldn't tell him any of it. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm just lonely. I get it, seriously. Shinso shrugged and turned his attention back to his food. There's plenty of other quirkless people in the world. It might not be what you wanted for yourself, but it's not like there's no hope. If only he knew. He's not going to kill you. Blankly you stared up at All Might, his form towering over you as he cornered you on the walkway between the public training grounds of the school and the main building. You knew what this was about, and he was starting to get impatient. Your silence now, stacked on top of the fact that you'd been ignoring his texts over the recent days, was obviously grating on his nerves. I understand it's something new and strange, and that you'd come to terms with the lot you'd drawn in life. But everything's changed now. Why don't you reach your hand out to grasp it? Young Midoriya is good. You would be happy. Unwilling to continue to crane your neck up, you let your eyes drop to the ground. Truth be told, you weren't sure why you were pushing it off so resolutely. All Might was right, you didn't have any real reason beyond it being something new and strange. Maybe it was the independence that you'd slowly built this far that was stopping you, or that you had seen for yourself that Midoriya was bright and shining and it was almost overwhelming. You don't need to answer, but you need to seriously think about the consequences of your continued dismissal. He still doesn't know that you're his soulmate, but if you continue to dig your heels into the ground and deny him the happiness that he is searching for as well. I get it. You cut All Might off, lifting your head again to fix him with a weary look. I've been alone. All this time, I've been working on myself and my goals. In the path that I've been building for my life to follow, there's only been room for one. It is not so hard to widen a path once it has been laid. All Might's massive hand came to rest on your shoulder, its weight making your knees buckle briefly. You opened your mouth briefly to speak, but you were startled by another voice approaching with a call of All Might's name. Hey, I know you said you'd meet me out front, but you're late. Oh. Of course, you knew that voice. It had been ringing in your head since you first heard it, accompanied by longing visions of green and the singular smile that had been directed your way. Both of you turned to look at Midoriya, his approach having been stopped only a few feet away when he realized you were there too. Young Midoriya, I'm sorry to make you wait, we can head out right now. You're the one from before on the first day, Midoriya trailed off, his eyes trained on you curiously. You hadn't expected him to remember, and maybe you had hoped he didn't, but the small smile spreading on his mouth and across his pink cheeks told a different story. Lost in your reverie, you barely heard All Might introducing you by name. It was only when Midoriya spoke again that you snapped out of the trance you'd fallen in. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to have a name to go with your face. I've seen you around the school. And not that I was watching or... Midoriya cut himself off with a gulp of air, and his eyes looked frantically to All Might for some sort of rescue from the hole he'd dug for himself. All Might looked to him with a weary smile, then he turned to look at you. He expected something of you, but you weren't going to rise to it. Instead, you cleared your throat and tried to give Midoriya a smile that matched the one he'd started with. It's nice to meet you too. I should get home. I'll see you two tomorrow. All Might's disappointment was palpable when you scurried away, but you weren't sure what he was expecting. If you were going to spill the beans to Midoriya, it wouldn't be with the symbol of peace hovering above. Your expectations for the results of that conversation were minimal at best. All Might would no doubt find you again today to pressure you to reveal who you really were to Midoriya. You would stare longingly across the room at said boy. Midoriya would be oblivious to it all. Imagine your surprise when you climbed into your usual train to head to school and your name was called out by the last person you expected. Pushing his way through the tightly packed train was Midoriya, his hair startlingly visible against the sea of bodies. When he was close enough to speak, he smiled through his breathlessness. You ride this train too? We should ride together from now on. Before you could weigh this against the other option of telling him no, you nodded once. That's fine. You get on before me though. Oh, well, I can just get off at your station and wait for you? You agreed because telling Midoriya that he simultaneously made you want to launch yourself from the moving train and wrap yourself around him like a scarf was out of the question. Your conversation lapsed for a moment, and it didn't pick back up until the two of you got off the train and started the short walk to school. All Might, he told me everything. You froze, falling a few feet behind before he realized that you'd stopped walking. His lips moved, but the blood rushing in your ears blocked him out. Why would All Might do something like that? You'd been trusting him to let you make your own judgment on this situation, and instead he ripped it from you before you could. Maybe he was tired of waiting for you, or maybe Midoriya brought it up. The last one seemed plausible. Midoriya didn't seem like an idiot. He had to have made the connection. That getting a quirk may give him a soulmate, but All Might would have messaged and told you he'd done this, right? A quick shake to your shoulders brought you from your terror-induced trance. Holding on to your shoulders was Midoriya, looking at you with worry. Are you okay? I didn't think that would shock you so much. It did? I'm sorry. I didn't catch what you said at the end there. Midoriya's shoulders relaxed in time with his small smile. I said that it's nice to have someone I can talk to now about everything between All Might and me. I didn't expect you to know about One for All, though. How did you find out? You paused, scrambling for a lie that you could put together. You hoped your relief wasn't so obvious to him. In the end, you decided on a half-truth. After the entrance exams, I was in the infirmary. He transformed when he thought I wasn't awake. Afterward, he explained everything with Recovery Girl. And he gets on my case for being careless. Midoriya mumbled under his breath before he yanked his hands off your shoulders like they'd been burned. Anyway, let's get to school, okay? Your walk was mostly silent, and Midoriya bid you a farewell as you parted ways to go to your own homerooms. Most of your thoughts during your morning classes were dominated by either relief that your secret hadn't been let out, or the shining smile that Midoriya gave you as you walked away, his cheeks pink despite his happiness. You wanted to keep that happiness on his face, you decided. When the school went on lockdown, you felt a pang of terror go through your heart for a split second. It didn't take long for the news that something had happened at the USJ with the first-year Hero Course students to spread amongst the classrooms. Someone must have messaged it out, or maybe a student overheard a teacher. Either way, if Mitsuji-sensei hadn't been present, there would be chaos. Instead, she went through the usual procedures of securing the room before making attempts to calm everyone down. Next to you, Shinso was relaxed in his chair, messing around on his cell phone and ignoring the happenings around him. You couldn't be so relaxed, not when you knew Midoriya was part of the first-year Hero Course that likely went to the USJ today. Was he injured? The full details hadn't been spread around, but it was clear that there had been an attack on that facility. It was hard to keep calm with every worst-case scenario running through your mind. Your phone buzzed in your pocket, and you fished it out hurriedly to look at the message. You had to wipe your finger off on your blazer to get rid of the sweatiness, since the fingerprint reader kept denying you access. Do as your sensei says. Before you could question the cryptic message from All Might, Mitsuji caught your attention by the wrapping of an invisible hand on the desk, using her quirk to make the sound. Head down to the infirmary. Take no detours, don't mess around. You grabbed your belongings quickly and hurried to the door that she unlocked only briefly. Behind you, a click of the bolts turning again could be heard, locking you out. You were uneasy, but not afraid. All Might wouldn't have called you down if there was imminent danger in the building. Still, you followed Mitsuji's orders and practically ran to the bottom-floor clinic. If you were being called to the infirmary, that may well mean that something had happened to Midoriya. The thought of him being injured made you pick up your pace to a full-on sprint, the adrenaline letting to continue on for much farther than you expected. You wished he'd given you some news on Midoriya's condition, if only to ease your worry. Against your instinct to yank the door open, you knocked hurriedly and only entered when you heard the quiet voice of All Might ring back at you. Inside, two figures were on the beds, All Might and Midoriya. Both looked to be in rough shape, but not life-threatening as far as you could tell. Your tension eased when you saw that Midoriya seemed to be alert and in good health. Your name formed on his lips just as you spoke to the room. I got here as fast as I could. There's no emergency. All Might held a hand up to stop you, then let it fall to the bed limply, but I know the news spread, and I thought you may be worried. There are some things that need to be spoken about. Are you going to? No, it's not solely that, All Might promised with a solemn shake of his head, before looking to Recovery Girl. Am I fit to leave afterward? As long as you take it easy. No hero work, Recovery Girl warned, and hopped off her chair. Lock up when you're done. The door slid shut behind her, leaving the three of you alone. All Might paused for a moment, and you took the chance to cross the room and sit at the foot of Midoriya's bed. You addressed him first, looking over him once. Are you hurt? Well, not badly. Just some rest and I'll be fine. Really? Your question seemed to unnerve him, judging by the blush on his face. Still, your eyes fell to his bandaged hand and arm, worry seeping through your veins again. All Might cleared his throat to gain your attention, the pensive look on his face unsettling you further. You hadn't realized your hand outstretched toward his arm, and you silently cursed at yourself for being so careless. Midoriya, I'll meet you outside. I'd like to speak to them alone. Without question, Midoriya staggered to his feet and brushed himself off with his uninjured hand. Okay, I'll be waiting then. See you. The door slid shut, and after his footsteps faded down the hallway, All Might started to speak. I told you that I wouldn't spill your secret unless he directly asked about it. That hasn't come up, obviously. However, taking recent events into account, I think it best if you choose one of two options. And those are? Tell Midoriya the truth. That you also inherited One for All and the two of you are soulmates. You join the hero course and allow us to train you to harness your quirk to better protect yourself. Having One for All isn't just physically dangerous to your body. It's also a magnet for villains hoping to grab hold of it and use it for their own gain. You need to be able to protect yourself in some capacity. The other option. You tell Midoriya the truth. You stay in the general studies course. You allow me to train you to harness One for All and protect yourself. Either way, learning to use this quirk is out of your hands now. It seems like telling Midoriya is out of my hands too. Shot back, anger brewing in the depths of your stomach. Either way, you'd have to confront Midoriya. Either way, you'd have to train with this quirk you never asked for. Now you were in danger for whatever reason by no actions of your own. Yes, it is. Because it would seem suspicious that you are learning to use a quirk that is an exact mirror image of his own. I understand that things are moving quickly, but I need you to understand that your inaction will cost you dearly. His words stung with a combination of their bluntness and the truth that they held. The longer you waited to talk to Midoriya, the harder it would be to do so. That's what you assumed this was about, until All Might slowly climbed from the bed to stand at his feet, a hand held toward you with a pointed finger extended toward your stomach. One for All may have been initially entrusted to Midoriya, but it is inescapable that you now hold it too. One for All is meant to help the people of the world have hope, to protect them when they can no longer fight against the forces around them. Now, you hold One for All and you need to step up and act. Reach out and grab hold of what is in front of you, because your lack of conviction can no longer be entertained. Lack of conviction? Your brewing anger turning into a roaring fire as you got to your feet. Sorry for not having conviction towards something I never wanted. Never in my life would I have wanted this quirk, but suddenly it's been forced upon me, completely out of my control. Every day I have to work to control it so I don't lose it and shatter my bones again. Even now, I feel like I can't get my hands around it. I don't want it, All Might. One for All is a burden I didn't ask to bear. In this life, there are burdens we bear that we don't ask for, but we have to do it so that others don't have to. So, I'm meant to bear it? You cut him off again. I sure drew the short straw then. My whole life, I've been quirkless and I've made it by. I've worked so hard to be happy with my lot in life. I was quirkless, without a soulmate, without someone else tying me down. I was capable of forging forward on my own, through my own power and will. You took a deep breath to try and calm yourself, to try and get a leash on the quirk that was starting to thrum through your veins beyond your control, and All Might took the chance to try and speak. Before he could get further than inhaling, your words burst forth again beyond any control you might have tried to enforce, and I was happy, All Might. I was happy being alone and taking care of myself. Now, I have this quirk that suddenly makes me the one to shoulder the burdens of others. I have a soulmate that I had stopped asking for years and years ago. Don't you understand? I don't want any of this. F dash. You punctuated your final curse with a kick to the bed frame. Maybe it was your fury, or maybe you had more control over one for all than you originally thought, because the steel frame buckled under the force of your blow and you felt nothing. All Might started to speak once more, no doubt to try and make you stay and give you the false illusion of choice. You ignored him, slamming the door shut and blocking him off. Are you finally going to tell me what's going on, or are you going to keep messing around? Your answer didn't come from your locked bedroom door. Shinso sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. You hadn't gone to school yesterday or today, and didn't answer his messages, so he could only correctly assume that you had locked yourself away over something. When he arrived at your house, your parents welcomed him inside and let him try his best to coax you out. Is this about Midoriya? On the other side of the door you leaned against it, seated on the floor. You looked down to your feet that were stretched in front of you, and waggled them once or twice before opening your mouth and finally answering your friend. Partly. And the other part? Should you really tell Shinso about this? Really, he could just use his quirk and get it all from you. It made you appreciate him just a bit more, and you finally climbed to your feet to unlock the door behind you and walk away. Shinso obviously heard your movements, and the door opened to let him in for only a moment before it was securely locked again. I can't tell you most of it, but I'll tell you what I can. Shinso unknowingly copied your previous position and slid his back down the door to sit against it. You took a seat on your bed facing him, and what do you know? The pattern on your blankets suddenly seemed interesting to follow with the tips of your fingers. And you're just going to drop that on me, knowing that I could easily get the rest out of you? You've answered me at least twice already. Shinso grinned his weird-ass smile when he earned a withering look from you as you spoke. I know you won't. You're not like you say you are. I guess you'd know better than anyone. Are you going to spill what you're moping around about? The comforter pattern turned interesting again, but not enough to distract you from the situation you've allowed to pass over your bedroom threshold. After a moment of gathering your words and doodling invisible shapes on the fabric, you blurted out, I have a quirk. Excuse me? The reaction you expected. As far as Shinso knew, you were a quirkless kid that got into UA on merit alone. You flicked your gaze up to gauge his reaction, and his wide eyes weren't surprising. Against your own wishes, you explained further, I was born quirkless, yeah. Somehow, someone out there got a quirk late in their life. Someone who was meant to be my soulmate. And I know who it is. Even without a mind-reading quirk, you could see Shinsu's thoughts rolling over that handful of sentences quickly. He wasn't an idiot and probably had figured this much, but you mumbled the name you'd been haunted by for months now, Midoriya Izuku. You think it's Midoriya? Neither of us have seen his quirk. Trust me, I know it's Midoriya. Don't ask me how, you know I can't tell you, but trust me. It's him. So, you've been cooped up in this room for days because you finally have a soulmate? A soulmate that you actually like? Shinso cut you off when you opened your mouth to interrupt him. Don't act like you don't. I've had to watch you stare holes in the side of his head every day since the school year started. It's not just him. You finally cut in and got to your feet to soothe the restless energy that had started to gather. Whether it was from your anxiety over the situation or your tenuous hold on one for all slipping, you weren't sure, but you needed to pace to get rid of the rumbling inside of you. Your unwanted quirk rolled through your veins like lava, begging you to just let it free. You hated it. Shinso, on the other hand, looked calm but confused. You have more than one soulmate? No, stupid. You hissed, stopping your steps long enough to give him an irritated look. There's more to all of this, but I'm not sure how much I can even tell you. Shinso didn't say anything, and instead settled back against the door and crossed his ankles to wait for you to continue with whatever you intended on telling him. Maybe you could let a little bit slip, just enough for him to know the gist of your problems? But you hated to think about what All Might would do if he found out. You can't tell anyone. You know I won't. Honesty was his strong suit, and the moment he said those words you knew he wouldn't. So, you turned your eyes to the floor and picked over what you could feasibly give to him. This quirk? It's something that needs to be used for hero work. It's passed from person to person, with each one using it for good to help others. Whoever has it, they have to shoulder that burden. Who says? You weren't expecting that, and you gaped at Shinso openly as he got to his feet and crossed the room. That's what has you worked up? You feel like you have to be a hero now? No. The person who gave it to Midoriya gave me an ultimatum. Allow him to train me privately or move to the hero course. Either way, I'm stuck learning to use this quirk and I'm forced to tell Midoriya. By the time you finished your sentence, Shinso was close enough to reach both hands out and drop both of them on your shoulders. You didn't realize you were holding tension there until his thumbs rubbed soothing circles on them. It's a shitty situation, one you have no control over. But they are right. If this quirk is something coveted like that, then you need to learn to use it to protect yourself. If you really don't want to be a hero, then let him train you privately. Find your own reasons for doing it, you don't have to follow his. Your own reasons? You blinked at him owlishly as his mouth upturned in a smirk, one you recognized for its use in moments of spite. You're not obligated to do anything in this life, don't forget that. If you don't want to be a hero, then you don't have to. Let him train you so that you can protect yourself and only yourself. If you have to transfer to the hero course, do it because you want to, not because you need to. Think of it this way. Shinso let his hands drop, then brought one up to lay over his heart. I have a quirk and I want to be in the hero course, but I was passed over. Why is that? Because your quirk wasn't flashy in the entrance exams? The smartest. Yes, but also because the setting wasn't suited to the way I want to be a hero. Maybe the setting isn't right for you yet. What are you saying, Shinso? If you'd let me finish, I'm saying that I think you should join the hero course. The curriculum is the same, with extracurricular lessons being hero-related, instead. You're earning the same credits, just the setting is different. You think I'll find inspiration there? Maybe. If not, it's not like you wasted your time. If anything, it'll get whoever it is you're talking about off your back about it. Then you can focus on what you're going to do about Midoriya. You turned a half step away to glance at your phone on the desk. If you unlocked the screen, you knew it would already be on the contact page for Midoriya. You'd typed out at least 100 messages over your time in here, deleting and rewriting out your feelings and thoughts on this entire matter. Some angry, some a bit too sappy. None of them had been sent. I'm sure you've been told this 1,000 times, but telling him isn't going to hurt anything, you know. I get that you're this lone wolf on the path of life, or whatever flowery things you've been writing in your diary, but it's not like you have to be. Letting Midoriya in might take up space in your life, but you'll also be taking space in his. You won't be losing anything. It is not so hard to widen a path once it has been laid. Your silence satisfied Shinso, and he clapped you on the shoulder once before turning toward the door. Think about it. Anyway, I've got to pick up groceries. I'll see you tomorrow at school. You turned to your phone. Dagoba Beach looked so much different than what you remember it looked as a child. Once, it had been piled high with garbage and refuse, but now it was white sands and a long pier that jutted out into the ocean with no trash in sight. Even the water seemed cleaner, somehow. You didn't remember any kind of word effort to clean it, but you weren't about to put a question mark where the universe put a PRD. At the end of the pier, you swung your legs over the side and looked down at the conversation on the screen. You didn't need to save the number to know that it was All Might, even if his way of texting wasn't as boisterous as he was in his muscle form. The 3 dots signified that he was typing, and you read over your previous message once more. I'll join the hero course, on one condition. You figured he would be writing a novel to lecture you on trying to weasel your way out of this, but instead you finally got a single question mark back to show he was listening. Carefully, you typed out your sole condition, one that you finally decided on after spending the last 2 days skulking in your bedroom. Let me tell Midoriya when I feel the time is right. I want to get to know him first. 3 bouncing dots again, and you tucked your phone into your hoodie's front pocket to avoid watching it in anticipation. Shinsu's words weren't wrong, and you thought about them a lot last night before coming to this conclusion. You were still wary of Midoriya, and despite something inside of you screeching for you to connect with him and tell him about the circumstances, you wanted to do this in a way that you were comfortable with. Get to know him, you decided. Maybe your path was built for one now, but maybe if you had some more time you could build space for two brick by brick. You closed your eyes and leaned back on your hands to feel the rising sun hit you. You had a bit more time until you needed to go home and get ready for school, but you hoped that being in a serene place like this would keep you calm for this conversation with All Might. Especially after the disaster that was the last one. Your phone buzzed in your pocket, and you forced yourself to leisurely pull it out and look at the response you'd gotten. Relief rolled through you in one large wave, and your shoulders slumped as a result. As long as you agree that you will tell him, then we can continue on with putting you in the hero course as soon as possible. According to Aizawa, the soonest we could get your paperwork transferred and start you in the course is after the sports festival. Great, so you had even more time than you expected. 2 weeks, at the very least. Maybe thinking that way was unhealthy, but you dreaded the thought of joining a new class that you weren't even originally interested in. Before you could type a response, another message from All Might came through. Still, I would like to give you some coaching before the festival. Even as a general study student, you are still expected to participate in the festival itself. If you expect to make it far, you'll need to use One for All. You didn't expect to make it far, and you messaged All Might so, but he still insisted that the two of you meet up next weekend at Dagoba Beach to go over a few key things about One for All. When you were younger, you still looked up to All Might despite not having wishes to be a hero. He was a beacon of hope for everyone. So, it stung a bit when you realized your previous encounter with him had soured your opinion just the smallest amount. You climbed to your feet, tucking your phone away and pulling your shoes back on so you could walk back home and get ready for school. As you turned and started your walk down the pier, you caught sight of someone below that was jogging across the sand, shirtless and sweating. Hurriedly, you whipped your head forward and booked it away from the beach. Luckily, he hadn't seen you, but you knew you wouldn't be able to get the picture of a shirtless Midoriya out of your mind. So what? You asked around a mouthful of food. You'd come in just at the bell that morning, and there wasn't much room to talk between classes during the day, so Shinso had only been able to corner you at lunch when the two of you inevitably sat together. So, are you swapping classes or not? Don't play dumb. You paused to swallow your rice before shrugging, I guess. Not until after the sports festival. I'm stuck getting remedial training next weekend. It's smart of them to wait, Shinso mused, and his eyes fell to his own tray where he mixed around his food in its bowl. Did you know general study students can be moved to the hero course if they perform well in the festival and in academics? If they wait until after the festival, they could feasibly say you did well enough to bump you up. How do you know that? You pressed and he shrugged half-heartedly in response. I need to know every avenue I can take into the hero course if that's my end goal. Right, you'd almost forgotten about that. You let the conversation fall flat as you mulled over his words. Shinso wanted to be in the hero course so badly, and you'd earned a spot through no real effort of your own. You felt terrible about it, even if he was the one to suggest you take the offer in the first place. The moment you opened your mouth to speak, he interrupted you with a sharp look and blunt words. Don't feel bad about it. I'll follow you soon enough, trust me. I know where I'm meant to be. Just scout them out and find the weakest link. I'll handle it from there. You felt somewhat bad that you'd brushed off Midoriya's messages that morning and the morning before. After the first time on the train, the two of you rode together a few times, but you ignored his messages in favor of heading to school on your own. To make it up to him, or maybe to just ease your guilt for brushing him off, you sent him a message after lunch asking if he wanted to ride home together. His answer was almost immediate, and he promised to meet you at the front doors of the school as soon as he could once the day was done. That lead you to sitting on the top step and playing on your phone? The courtyard deserted since it was nearing close to an hour since classes had officially ended. Midoriya wouldn't leave you hanging, so you could only assume that he was being held up by something. So, you were patient and played that new Pokemon game on your phone while you waited. You were so engrossed that you didn't notice Midoriya dropping to sit next to you, and you stayed that way until his elbow hesitantly nudged your side and snapped you out of it. Startled, you almost dropped your phone down the long flight of stairs, but you were able to catch it with both hands after a bit of fumbling. Don't do that. Your warning seemed harsh, but Midoriya just smiled sheepishly and shrugged. Sorry, but you seemed really into it. We've been sitting here for almost 15 minutes now. Well, an hour and 15 for me, you reminded him gently while tucking your phone in your pocket. He had the decency to be ashamed at this, and he winced while looking down the stairs. Yes, sorry. All Might had some things he wanted to talk about with the sports festival coming up. He can be long-winded? Yeah, I know, trust me. Your mumble interrupted him as you got to your feet. Almost too quickly, Midoriya followed you up and curled his hands around the straps of his backpack. Anyway, are you ready to head out? We should get going before it's dark. You nodded in response and followed him down the stairs without much conversation. Instead, you watched the back of his head and smashed down thoughts of reaching your hand forward to run your fingers through the messiness of it. Maybe smooth it down a bit or at least brush it. You scowled, just in time for Midoriya to turn over his shoulder in preparation to say something to you. Instead, he caught your expression with surprise and stopped in his tracks. Immediately, you apologized, but something in his eyes told you he had something to say, so you shut your mouth. After a long moment of his eyes darting anywhere but you, he finally looked at you through his lashes, his head downturned. Can I ask you something? Yeah, you said, immediately feeling dumb about the ineloquent response, but you also felt that way for letting Midoriya catch you with such a nasty expression that he undoubtedly thought was for him. Do you? Well, what I want to say is, Midoriya paused for a moment, closing his eyes to gather his thoughts and let them catch up to his mouth. Do you not like me? Sometimes it feels like you only tolerate me being around you, and then the past 2 days you didn't answer my messages. I guess I just want to know if I'm being a bother or not. I'd like to be friends, but I don't want to be pushy. Definitely not the questions you were expecting, and you stared at him openly for a long moment. He took your silence as an affirmative and turned a half-step away. He had pulled his lips between his teeth, and then he let them go. You could see the slightest of trembling across them. The shaking in his words confirmed that you had really messed things up this time. I'll just head home, I guess. Sorry if I... It's not like that, Midoriya. You interrupted him, reaching out to wrap a hand around his elbow to stop his advance. He froze, looking at you in confusion, and you realized that you had acted rather quickly. His arm was warm through the blazer he wore, and you had to force yourself to pull your hand back and break off the first real physical contact you'd had with him. I just have a lot on my mind. You're not in my class, so I guess you didn't know, but I've been sick the past 2 days, so I haven't been talking to anyone. You're not a bother, I promise. In fact, I'd like to be friends too, if you'd let me. Like clouds cracking open to reveal the sun, a smile started to cross his worried face. At the end, you were given the largest smile you had seen on him thus far, and his hands visibly tightened around the straps of his backpack in what you assumed was excitement. Yeah, you really seem like someone I want to get to know, and if All Might trusts you, then I know you must be a good person. You didn't expect that last part, but you didn't want to deny it and ruin his image of you. You weren't a terrible person, but you couldn't hold a candle to this blazing sun in front of you with his shining grin and buzzing happiness from only a few sentences. It was infectious, and you let a small smile creep over your face in response. Soon, you promised yourself one more time. You're Quirkless, right? Your hand froze mid-scroll, the news articles slowing their movement across the screen of your cell phone. Subconsciously, you gripped the pole you were leaning against a bit tighter. You hoped you misheard him, but even in the loud train, you knew you hadn't. Surprisingly, you made it this long without Midoriya mentioning it. With only a week left until the sports festival, you knew something would have to give. All Might wouldn't let you get away with not using the quirk you ended up with. Midoriya was known to be a fiend for anything quirk-related, so this would have to come up eventually. Should you lie? You weren't sure, but a few moments had gone by and Midoriya moved a bit closer to ask the question again, probably thinking that you hadn't heard him over the steady rumble of the train and the voices of its occupants. From this distance, you could smell him. It was a mixture of some sort of shampoo and laundry detergent, and you practically held your breath to avoid breathing it in heavily like some kind of creep. After another agonizing moment of chaos in your head, you lifted your eyes to him. No, I'm not. Oh, what's your quirk then, if you don't mind me asking? If you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. I just really like. It's kind of like super strength, I guess. That's similar to mine. Though I can't use mine without seriously injuring myself, Midoriya trailed off, his eyes looking over your head with a small flush of red on his cheeks. But I'm getting better. Really? I'm sure you are. You agreed, forcing a smile so you didn't reveal that you were trying not to spontaneously combust from the pure anxiety that his simple question loaded onto you. Midoriya seemed to recover from his embarrassment quickly, and he turned his eyes back to you with a small smile. With a quirk like that, you probably could have gotten into the hero course. Your hesitation was obvious this time, and Midoriya looked mortified almost immediately, sputtering a quick apology. I am sorry, that just came out. I should have thought about that first. Don't worry about it, you soothed him and mustered up another smile. They always seemed to calm him down, you noticed, albeit causing him to blush pink when he caught sight of them. With a shrug, you looked back down to your phone. It's not over, till it's over, I still have a chance, right? Oh yeah. What that Shinso guy said. Midoriya trailed off, pinching his chin between his thumb and forefinger as he thought it over. I suppose if you did well enough in the sports festival, you could be bumped up. Not to mention your grades. You let him continue on with his muttering and engrossed yourself in news articles again. Hopefully it would keep him from pressing for more information on your quirk. All Might insisted on meeting at Dagoba Beach before sunrise, and once you arrived you could see a few things scattered in a short area on the beach. A refrigerator, a few pieces of metal scraps, some cinder blocks. All Might was sitting on top of the fridge in his smaller form, his chin in his hand as he waited. When he noticed your arrival, he hopped down with a grunt and met you halfway, just outside the strange ring of garbage that had somehow shown up. You figured he was the culprit, but you didn't want to point fingers. You're looking well. It's early, you griped at him, rubbing the crustiness out of your eye with the palm of your hand. His thin lips quirked up at the corners before he planted his hands on his hips in an imitation of his signature pose. It's never too early to get a head start on the day. Desperately, you tried not to roll your eyes. After a few moments, All Might sighed and let his arms fall to his sides. Let's get started then. Tell me, what does One for All feel like to you? When I use it? Or just in general? Both, actually. It may help me figure out how it differs from young Midoriya. Compared his feelings to an egg in a microwave. That's kinda lame, but alright. You shrugged and crossed your arms, thinking of a good analogy for the thrumming you felt in your veins up until this very moment. You wanted to say it felt like a separate entity flowing through you, but it had become too familiar to call it that. If you focused too hard on the feeling, it felt like pins and needles that you wanted to shake off. Or maybe like when your limbs feel restless after too much caffeine. All Might was patient and waited without a word until you nodded to yourself and looked up at his taller form while finally answering, It's like my own blood is something I could reach out and grab. I can feel it going through my veins. But if I focus too hard on it, it feels like it wants to fight against any control I have. That's normal, you've not had it for a year. Though, it does sound like you've acclimated rather well to it. I noticed that you had used it on the bed in the school's infirmary without any negative effects. I don't know how, I was angry and already had trouble holding onto it up until then. I guess some of it slipped out. All Might appraised you for a moment before turning a half step away to point at the objects he'd lain out on the beach. The sun still hadn't risen, but the horizon was beginning to grow just a bit lighter. You noticed he had specifically pointed out the cinder blocks. Break those. What? You've shown you can use One for All without hurting yourself. Think back to that moment, and how it felt when you let that bit of control slip. Recreate it. Immediately, you wanted to say no, but All Might ignored any kind of protest you had. With a bit of hesitance, you walked to the stack of cinder blocks and looked them over. They were like new, with no obvious weaknesses. You really would need to use this dumb quirk to pass his test. What if I use too much? Then you will have learned a valuable lesson. Which is? You called to him over your shoulder, and he gave you a swift thumbs up? Like that would assuage your worries. That you used too much. Jesus Christ, you mumbled under your breath before turning back to the blocks. Get angry, that's what you coached yourself. Hard to do when you've been having a pretty decent morning so far. But maybe you didn't have to be angry. Instead, you focused on that feeling through your veins. In your arms, legs, even your head felt full of this power. Using it was simple, you just needed to let go. That much you knew already. But if you let go a little bit, like slowly loosening your hands off the leash of a dog that was begging to run. When you brought your fist down on the cinder blocks, you knew you had messed up. Your arm felt like it was rattled down to the marrow, and you cradled it against yourself with a string of pitiful groans. All Might dropped to his knee next to you and took your arm into his hands to squeeze and examine it. After a few moments, he let it go and you pulled it to yourself again. Not broken, but neither are the cinder blocks. What happened? Well, you didn't use too much, that's for sure. In fact, it felt like you used none at all, and you told All Might this as you finally pushed yourself to your feet to try and shake off your mistake. A quick glance at your knuckles revealed they were scuffed and bleeding, quite a bit actually. All Might's eyes traveled to them, and he reached into the pocket of his cargo pants to hold up a roll of gauze. You expected this? You hissed, and he had the gall to smile as he started to wrap your knuckles up. Of course, I'm asking you to use the quirk when you're afraid to. I figured your first few tries would use too little to really do anything at all. You're a jerk, you grumbled, and that seemed to hurt All Might's feelings judging by his frown, but you brushed him off in favor of turning back to the cinder blocks. He was right, there wasn't even a dent in them. After a moment of calculating where you might have gone wrong before, you reached for that power again and let off the brakes just a little bit more. Before you let your reared fist fly, you stopped and felt it out. Would this be enough? Your arm had that prickling feeling again, like it was starting to go to sleep after being folded up, but it was similar to your last attempt. A little more, you decided, and that feeling increased to an almost painful degree. All Might's hand came down on your shoulder, and your concentration snapped, and you hurriedly grabbed at what you'd let go of to pack it back into its metaphorical box. You were shaking like a leaf. I was concentrating. Last time I used too little, I didn't want to overdo it by overcompensating. All Might's mouth opened to speak, but he clapped it shut instead and only nodded as you turned back to the blocks. The process started again, letting one for all go inch by inch, like a teenager learning to drive. Stop and go. For a brief moment, you wondered what would happen if you slammed on the gas. Would you die? Maybe not, but your bones would be shattered like the entrance exam all over again. Against your morbid wish to see it, you settled for a marginal amount more than last time and let your fist fly. Again, your arm felt like it had been shoved in a blender, but before you dropped to your knees to cradle it, you could see the crack in the cinder block at the top of the stack, neatly down the middle. In your opinion, it seemed a bit unfair for every course to compete against one another in the sports festival. Obviously, the hero and support courses would inevitably rise to the top due to their specialized training in offense use of their quirks. It just didn't make much sense. Of course, maybe it's because you were dreading the entire event. When you woke up in the morning, you felt a heavy weight in your stomach that you couldn't just brush off as one for all making itself a bother. As you dressed in your gym uniform, your hands were shaking just the slightest amount. When you locked your house behind you, your chest felt tight. When you approached the station platform and saw Midoriya waiting patiently for you, you felt all of that tension leave. Oh, you're a bit early. His previously passive expression widened into a smile as you approached, and he hurriedly stuffed his cell phone into the pocket of his matching uniform. Are you as excited as I am? For the festival? Hardly. You forced yourself to look away from that smile, just in case it became infectious, but I'll be rooting for you. Well, I'll be rooting for you too. Don't count yourself out just yet. I'm sure there's a way you could use your strength quirk in the preliminary rounds. Yeah, if you wanted to break your legs. After suffering through 2 more of those training sessions with All Might, it appeared that your use of the quirk without any damaging side effects was limited to what he called 0.1% of its power, or something baffling like that. Either way, using one for all in any useful capacity would only end up with you in the dirt. But Midoriya didn't need to know that. You only gave a placating smile as he started to talk about possible tactics, ways he could use his own quirk without downright destroying himself, and he even spouted something about Kakin and his skill with his quirk. You'd learn who that was soon enough, no matter how things went with the festival today. Once on the train, the two of you found a corner that wasn't as crowded just in time for the doors to close and the cars to begin moving down the track. You held on to one of the vertical bars and clenched your fingers restlessly a few times around it. Midoriya had to have some idea of how you felt about this whole forced quirk thing, but it seemed like he saw it as a blessing. Nonetheless, you looked at him out of the corner of your eye as you spoke. Midoriya, are you happy with your quirk? Truly? Well, it's a bit of a hassle right now, but it's really letting me chase after my dreams of being a hero, you know? It's like, all my life, I was told I was being an idiot for wanting to be a hero without having a quirk. I was pretty determined. I was going to apply to it even without it. Midoriya paused and looked at his free hand, the other holding the bar just above yours. His fingers flexed a few times as he thought, before he decided on his next words, but I like to think of it like this. If I didn't have this quirk, what difference could I have made? Sure, I could have worked hard physically and mentally learned all I could about heroes, but in the heat of battle I may as well have painted a target on my back. Now, I have the means to do what I've always wanted, which is to give others hope when they don't have any. The answer you expected, so you weren't surprised. You poked your tongue in your cheek for a moment before pressing him further, but is that your place? Being a beacon of hope for someone, even if they aren't asking for it? Or if they don't need it? Midoriya's eyes snapped to you so quickly that you almost flinched in response. His eyes were resolute, like he was so confident in his answer that it couldn't be shaken. Everyone needs hope. And even if they don't ask for it, I'd still like to be there so they can always reach out if they want it. It may not be my job to intrude, but I want to be there so that those who are in need will have someone to depend on. That made a lot of sense. You looked at him quietly as he stared you down in return, and maybe you felt like you understood him just a bit better. An obstacle race. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise that it was something that you couldn't feasibly win. Not with some of the other quirks you saw during the opening ceremonies. One guy had engines on his legs. How could you compete with that? By using one for all, your brain supplied unhelpfully. Sure, you could use it. Getting through this round didn't matter if you were down for the count for the other rounds. Still, you decided to do your best as is, and hoof it while hoping for the best. After a few half-hearted stretches, you joined up with the other students that amassed by the door that signified a starting line. Before you could get too psyched up, a hand landed on your shoulder with a mumble of your name. You turned halfway to see Shinso, though his expression didn't seem very happy. Is something wrong? You asked, and he shook his head before opening his mouth. You didn't remember what came next. Your knees hit the ground, just as you felt the world come rushing in. Your brain felt like it was full of static, with it only increasing as you tried to recall just how you managed to get here. Teaming up with an unknown student, linking arms for Shinso to sit on your shoulders, Shinso using his quirk to get other students to fall back. A hand fell on your shoulder, similar to the last moment you remembered, and you whirled onto your backside to look up at them. Deja vu hit you as you saw a hand reached out in your direction, attached to a somber Shinso. Somehow, as the last 10 minutes started to come back to you in bits and pieces, you knew exactly what had just happened. With a smack, you swatted his hand away and glared, "You used your quirk on me? It got you into the next round, didn't it? We ranked high enough to move on." "Yeah, but you brainwashed me into being one of your flunkies carrying you. It's like I didn't even earn it. Would you have said yes if I asked first?" Without hesitation, Shinso once more reached down to grab your elbow and haul you to your feet. "You and I both know that you needed to make it at least this far." "Don't touch me," you hissed, pushing his hand off of you and taking a step backward. "I don't know why you thought that was a good idea, but it wasn't. Leave me alone." You felt like throwing up. Shinso had never used his quirk on you before, but to do it now without even asking. It felt like a huge violation of your friendship. His intentions were pure, you got that much, but that didn't matter when the actions were so underhanded. Conveniently, you found yourself a spot on the opposite end of the crowd from him and the rest of your classmates. It took everything in you not to just raise your hand and ask to be disqualified, even if it would look bad on your part. Before you could dwell too much on that avenue, a figure approached while calling your name to get your attention. "You made it through too? I knew you could do it," Midoriya's smile almost made it seem like the past few minutes were non-existent. You shook yourself away from those thoughts and tried to give him a smile in return. You could tell it didn't quite ring as true judging by the expression on Midoriya's face, but he didn't question it openly. Instead, your attention was pulled away by Midnight as she began her congratulatory speech to the top 42 competitors, and gestured to the large panel behind her that spun dramatically like a slot machine. You hoped for something less physically intensive, but that wasn't really in the spirit of a sports festival. Your already low hopes were smashed into the dirt when the slot machine stopped on 2 words. Cavalry battle. You remembered them from gym class in your public school, and the memories grew stronger as you recalled the amount of physical effort and ensuing injuries that came with this particular activity. But it also was a group event. Immediately, before you could second-guess it, you turned to your left to look at Midoriya, who was still at your side. If anyone could get you through this, it had to be him, right? It's not like your first choice was on the table anymore, not with what he'd done to you in the previous round. Before you could think further on that particular situation, you pushed it aside. Nothing to be done about it now, you chided yourself, it's not the time for that. Your movements weren't subtle, and green eyes turned to you in wonder, then embarrassment as they flitted away to the ground. Midnight explained the basics of the cavalry battle, while also tacking on that each player would be given a point value based on their ranking in the obstacle course. The terror that overcame Midoriya was visible like an aura around him as the screen popped up to show everyone's point totals. Right there, at the very top. Midoriya Izuku at 10 million points. Once more, you turned to him, alongside every other student on the playing field. A few thoughts were undoubtedly running through everyone's head, namely that it would be best to steal Midoriya's points and hoard them. On the other hand, you felt differently. Maybe it was because you found it hard to ignore the constant pull in your gut to him, or it was just the soft spot that you harbored from your friendship, but you made your decision as Midnight finished up her speech and allowed everyone to begin picking their teams. Midoriya. Huh? Your sudden burst of his name seemed to startle him out of his fear-induced stupor, and he stared at you in a mixture of wonder and hesitance as you reached a hand toward him. Let me be on your team. Why you? What? Seriously? Your answer was a nod, and like clockwork the tears in his eyes started to well up. Around the two of you, it was easy to see that everyone else had other ideas, chiefly to avoid teaming with Midoriya by giving a wide berth. The small smile that cropped up on your lips started his waterworks in earnest, and he hurriedly reached an arm up to swipe at his eyes with his sleeve. Hey Deku, let's team up. Yu Raraka? Whatever attempts he made to stop the tears were in vain, because he just kept on crying. Uraraka seemed unnerved, and instead turned to you to introduce herself properly. Once Midoriya pulled himself together, he quietly went over his next few choices for the final team member. Ida was one, though the moment you guys approached and explained your plan, he bowed out with a promise to beat Midoriya fairly. Disheartening, but not the only person on his list. Before Midoriya could even explain, one of the support corps students but her way in with an exclamation that she would be joining your team. If I'm on the team with the most points, everyone will be able to see my babies in action. Everyone's going to be watching this team, including every big-name CO that could get a glimpse of my precious babies. Yeah, sure, Midoriya stammered while looking at the chest that she had opened that seemed to be full of different support objects. One in particular caught your eye, and you reached down to pull it from the chest. This only made the girl grin as she clapped her hands in glee. You found one you like. That one's a personal favorite. They're bracers that fire mini grappling hooks. The wires are made with a special metal alloy so they can hold a crazy amount of weight. Wait, and this backpack is like the Jet Buster Heroes, right? Midoriya pulled another item out, increasing the girl's glee exponentially. The cogs in Midoriya's mind must be turning, because he was looking between the items and you with a furrowed brow. In the end, he came up with a plan that was brilliant. It was enough to bolster the confidence you had in your little group, and maybe getting on to the next round wouldn't be so difficult after all. That last part was a blatant lie. The weight of Midoriya above you, along with Uraraka and Mei's hands, was nothing compared to the decision you had no choice but to make. There was no possible excuse that you could give Midoriya for not using your strength quirk, So all you could do was nod as he explained the plan he came up with on the fly. The plan you absolutely hated. As Present Mike counted down, you could feel the eyes of every other contestant on your team, specifically the multi-million-point headband tied around Midoriya's forehead. On the starting mark, every team swerved in your direction without exception. Geez, they're not even giving us a chance. That's easy. We're just going to run. Uraraka's hoverboots started to hum, but before she could activate them fully, the ground began to turn to liquid, skin your team in up to their calves. Your struggles were fruitless, and before you could come up with your own solution, you felt a sudden weight yanking you upwards, Midoriya's jetpack. Over the heads of the other students, you shot through the air like a rocket, clinging to Midoriya's ankles for dear life so he didn't go flying off from his reduced weight, courtesy of Uraraka. From below, you could hear the exchange between two students calling out for action, then the earlobes of one of them shot out in the direction of your team. Do it. Right, you answered, letting go of one of Midoriya's ankles to point your wrist at one of the walls of the stadium. With a tense of your fist on the button that controlled it, the grappling hook shot out and caught in the wall. You didn't have time to hesitate or calculate, you just let slip what you thought would be enough and allowed a minute amount of one for all slip through to strengthen your arm enough to yank your team in that direction. The grappling hook retracted with a snap, though it whipped right at the end and caught your forearm. May's gasp over your shoulder told you that it must have injured you, but you were flying high on adrenaline and couldn't process the pain that should be coming from it. Great work! We're landing! Uraraka's call barely made it through your blood rushing in your ears, just in time for you to brace for the impact of hitting the ground running. May squealed over your right shoulder, her fingers curling against the muscle in your shoulder in what you assumed was delight. Aren't my babies amazing? Cuteness can be manufactured, you know. They're awesome. Excellent mobility. This is too easy. It's a bloodbath. Midoriya's weight above you whipped as he looked behind your group, and though you couldn't see them, he seemed to recognize the newcomers. Shoji. Is he by himself? Your frantic eyes were caught by the team in front of you, the same one that turned the ground to liquid. You tugged on Midoriya's ankle to get his attention. We're getting surrounded. Uraraka's sudden exclamation was worrying, especially when her movements revealed that it was a sticky ball from another of Midoriya's classmates that was causing the problem. You checked and made sure you weren't stuck, then looked at May over your shoulder. Before you opened your mouth, she shook her head. They won't handle that much. Hold on. Was all the warning you got from Midoriya before he activated the jetpack again and the four of you were shotgunned into the air. May's screech told you that it must have damaged Uraraka's boot in some way, but Midoriya assured her that it was the only option available. The series of explosions below told you that even this high up, you weren't safe. With a quick glance below, you could see there was a single student flying at you, propelling himself with explosions from his hands. His yell echoed through the stadium, even over the roar of the crowd. Don't think for a second you're safe. Kaken. You couldn't dwell on the familiarity of that name. Instead, you braced both arms and pointed them upwards at the cross beams arching over the stadium. A little more one for all this time. Last time wasn't so bad, you couldn't feel any real after effects. Maybe you hadn't used any at all? A little more, just enough to hang on as the grappling hooks stopped your forward momentum and sharply dragged the four of you up higher and out of range of the huge explosion the student below had set off. He started to descend, and you were only half relieved you couldn't relax knowing that you had done something terrible to your arms. The pain was searing as you finally made it out of range of the others and held on to the wires holding you aloft. Your arms. What's going on? Midoriya's voice wavered as you finally spared a glance at what you'd been ignoring. The initial laceration from using the grappling hooks wasn't terrible, but it seemed to have bled a lot. That wasn't what he was so worried about, though. Bruises had started to bloom across your skin in strange patterns, lines that zigzagged across one another in X-like patterns. It was one for all, you knew it was, and you cursed yourself internally for being so careless. Still, if you hadn't, you wouldn't have gotten away from that exploding guy only a few seconds ago. You let out a wheeze before answering, "It's fine. We can't stay up here even with the weight lessened. I understand. Uraraka, when they let go, get ready to use the other boot to help stop our descent." I'll use the low setting on the jetpack. Right. At that, you let your hand slip and the grappling hooks retracted with a snap, thankfully not hurting you this time. Your free fall sped up for a moment, before the momentum slowed thanks to the joint efforts of Uraraka and Midoriya. Just as you touched down, Present Mike called the halfway mark and went over the scoreboards. Thankfully, your team was still at the top, though you knew no one would overtake you unless they took your headband. A few others were unsurprising, though you saw Shinsu's team was slowly climbing. Again, you brushed that off and promised yourself you'd stew over your anger later. Mixing that with all this adrenaline wouldn't end up well for you. Before you could take a good look at the playing field, Midoriya's voice called down, "Your arms are shaking." "I'm good, I think it was the grappling hooks." You looked over your shoulder at him, and his expression told you that he didn't quite believe that. "I just can't use my quirk in my arms anymore." "That's fine, we won't use the grappling hooks anymore." "What about your legs? Could you launch us with your quirk?" "I can try, just say the word." "I think we'll be okay, though." Midoriya gestured for us to begin running to a fairly empty section of the playing field. Present Mix commentary was helpful in learning what was happening around you, but it wasn't enough to distract from the team of 4 that cut you off, sliding loudly to catch your attention. "Todoroki! Ida forward!" "Right." The engines on Ida's legs fired up, and you only had a split second to react as Todoroki's team barreled at you. Todoroki called out more orders to his team just as Midoriya's jetpack fired up. "Watch our surroundings. Everyone's after us." "I hope you made something strong, Yaoyorozu." The blonde on the team started to spark across his skin, and you realized that it was possible he had an electric-type quirk. There was nothing you could do about that, no way could you outrun lightning. "I got this." You heard from over your right shoulder, just as a rod shot out from under your right arm and jammed itself into the ground. You could see Mei's hand extended, wrapped around a metal rod that was extended into the ground. The rubber grip protected her as the rod's second extension flicked up from the main and acted as a grounding rod, pulling the electricity aimed at you and redirecting it into the ground. Simultaneously, ice traveled down the rod sticking out of Yaoyorozu's arm and hit the ground. It spread quickly then, ensnaring the feet of everyone in the immediate area excepting his own team. Uraraka had already begun pulling the rest of the team, and you followed her lead in running away and out of the ice's range. "Awesome thinking, Hatsum. I didn't know you had that." "Of course, I did my research, I know exactly who's competing, you know." But that wasn't enough, and Midoriya's exclamation about the backpack malfunctioning was worrying. Todoroki's team was closing in fast, following you all the way until Uraraka forcibly stopped your retreat. A quick glance showed that you had reached the end of the arena. Midoriya tried to be optimistic, reassuring that all we needed to do was just hold on to our headband. Todoroki's team was intimidating as they approached, and it felt like your doom was right there. It was silly, it's just a cavalry battle, but now you felt invested. Midoriya needed to make it through, at least. If you weren't able to, that wasn't so bad. You hoped that you'd done so far seemed like enough to the onlookers, and maybe your movement to the hero class wouldn't be so suspicious. So, you made a decision that was probably careless, but you were confident that it would work out for Midoriya, in the end. Less than 60 seconds. Let's hear it for our teams. Present Mix speech acted as the cue for everything that happened next. First, Ida lowered into a runner's position before they blasted his team forward with an explosion. Todoroki acted quickly, his hand reaching out to Midoriya's head as they ate the distance between your team and theirs. You grasped recklessly at one for all within you, and without much direction you pushed off the ground hard. Later, you would look back at the crater you made and wonder how you managed something like that. You passed over the heads of Todoroki's team. Your push-off was hurried and uneven, so your orientation changed enough that you were tilted, Midoriya's headband in reach of Todoroki's quickly moving hand. It was a mistake you should have accounted for, and maybe if you hadn't done this so quickly you would have. But it was impossible to change it now. Amazing! This game has been completely turned on its head. Todoroki's team has the 10 million points, while Midoriya's team has nothing at all. Don't let them go! Midoriya's exclamation was cut off as your team hit the ground roughly, just beyond where Todoroki's team had originally started. You fell to your knees, throwing off your team's balance. Pain was what you expected, searing and white-hot that would undoubtedly debilitate you for the rest of the festival. Instead, you felt nothing. Only the remnants of one for all pumping through your veins and begging to be set free in any way you could see fit. Midoriya's exclamation of your name was that got you back on your feet, knees shaking in the terror of expecting that pain. We need to get our points back. Let's go. We'll get the points back, Deku. I know it. Uraraka pushed the ground forward, pushing us toward the suddenly motionless Team Todoroki. At your approach, they looked ready to run despite Ida being unable to use his engines. Midoriya was determined to make things right, and you noticed as his arms stretched out over your head that his skin glowed orange with lines zigzagging across it in the same manner as the bruises on your forearms. You didn't think on it too much, instead you focused on using the remaining power in your veins to push off the ground again, focusing more on the feeling of using your quirk in a way that wasn't injuring you. Maybe now wasn't the time, not when Present Mike was counting down the seconds to the finish. Before you could straighten your thoughts out, a flash of white grabbed your attention and you snatched at it, ignoring the sudden pain in your arms from the swift movement. I got it. That's it, I did it. I got our points back. The crowd screamed as Present Mike announced your team's accomplishment over the loudspeaker. Your team skidded to a stop just at the edge of the ring, and you quickly looked down at your hands as Midoriya hurriedly looked at the band. Hatsum pointed out a horrifying detail. Please tell me I'm not looking at that right? 70 points? They mixed them up. Midoriya's voice went from triumphant to wavering in the span of a moment. Yoyorozu taunted your team from where they were originally standing, claiming that we underestimated them. Before any actions could be taken, the buzzer went off signifying the end of the round. We didn't make it. Midoriya's weight came back in full force as Uraraka finally let her quick release. Just as he lowered from your shoulders, you turned and moved your hand in his face, showing the fluttering object that you had grabbed in the finally scuffle. Wait, is that? In first place, Team Todoroki. In second place, Team Bakugo. Third place is Team Shinso? When did they come back from the dead? Curled in your fist was a white headband, courtesy of Todoroki's neck. The number 600 was stamped across it proudly in red, and you could pinpoint the exact moment that Midoriya had begun to sob uncontrollably, burying his face in the white material. In fourth place is Team Midoriya. The lunch break that was announced was a welcome rest from the back-to-back rounds. You excused yourself from the group, leaving the responsibility of consoling Midoriya to Uraraka. Instead, you joined back up with your classmates in your designated waiting room and tucked into the bento you packed from home. A figure sat down across from you, and you bristled immediately at their presence. With a sigh, Shinso opened his own lunchbox and set the lid on the table. Will you let me speak? You shook your head, refusing to answer him verbally. Another sigh came from him as he reached across the table to stop your hand from viciously stirring your rice. Look, I was in the wrong, okay? I shouldn't have used my quirk on you for the first round. I thought it was the easiest way to get both of us through, and it wouldn't have been convincing otherwise. You couldn't have asked first? I might have said yes. You couldn't have, you already know that. Besides, it was a last-second decision. I can promise you, I'll never casually use it on you like that ever again. Yeah, hard to believe when you've already done it once. You huffed around the chopsticks you unceremoniously jammed into your mouth. At least you didn't use it on me in the second rounds too. That's true. See? There's a silver lining everywhere you look. His mouth upturned into his weird smile, and you couldn't be bothered to return it. Instead, you glared at your food. I forgive you, I guess. But I'm still mad. That's better than nothing, I guess. So tell me, did you get a hold of that quirk of yours? Of course, he would notice the 2 occasions that you successfully used one for all without breaking your body with it. You didn't answer right away, and instead tried to pinpoint the conditions under which you'd done it. After a moment, you looked at him in the eye, noticing he still had that weird smile. Normally, I use it and I'm careful to use it where it's needed, and only a little bit. But when Todoroki was coming at us, I just threw it around myself like a blanket because I wasn't quite sure what I would need to do with it, you know? Maybe that's the key? Maybe it's too much in one spot, so you need to spread it over evenly. Like butter on toast. Are you calling me toast? Yes, sourdough. Your conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door of the room. One of the other students opened it and poked their head out, then looked directly at you after seeing who it was. They're asking for you. It's that kid from 1A. Midoriya? Shinso reached out to snatch your leftover bento as you got to your feet, and you let him indulge in the rest of your lunch as you stepped out of the room. Midoriya was in the hallway, shifting from foot to foot in what looked to be nervousness. He didn't notice you came out right away, and nearly jumped to the ceiling when you called his name. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking about some things. You never went to Recovery Girl, so I thought I'd come make sure you went. He trailed off with a small laugh, rubbing the back of his neck as he refused to look at you in the eye. Instead, his eyes were drawn to your arms and the strange bruises that crisscrossed them. Sure, let's go. Midoriya took up the lead, and you followed behind him a few steps. He didn't make any move to travel beside you, and instead stuck his hands in his pockets as he mumbled under his breath. You couldn't quite make it out, but this was a definitely 180 from the excitement he had only a half hour ago. Recovery Girl's infirmary was empty, since the other injured students came by before eating. After a quick examination, she narrowed her already wrinkled eyes at you before planting a kiss on your forehead. Exhaustion crept over you, and she gave you a handful of sweets to make up for it and ushered you out into the hallway where Midoriya was waiting. Is something wrong, Midoriya? You ventured after the two of you stood in prolonged silence. Still, he looked at your arms, despite no longer being injured. You almost questioned it for a moment before you thought back to the final moments of the second round, when Midoriya reached over your head with a glowing, black-marked arm. Marks that looked like what you'd mistakenly given yourself. It clicked that maybe he realized more than you thought, and was starting to piece some things together. You needed to do something. This wasn't the way you wanted to explain things to him. Before you could open your mouth to try some damage control, a third voice interrupted the two of you. Midoriya, I'd like to speak with you. Alone. Todoroki, your brain supplied the name as you looked at the newcomer. Midoriya's eyes looked from you, to Todoroki, and then back again. You nodded, trying to give him a smile that seemed encouraging. We'll talk later. It gave you time to come up with a convincing lie. Your hour-long break was definitely not relaxing. After Midoriya left with Todoroki, you must have stood in that hallway for another 30 minutes, frantically thinking about what your next step would be. There's no way that Midoriya didn't already put two and two together. Just the look in his eyes, his body language, the tense air between you. He had to know, or at least suspect, that there was something more going on between the two of you. The obvious choice was to tell him the truth. That when All Might gave him one for all, it was unknowingly passed on to you as well. That somehow, whether it was predetermined before receiving the quirk, or if it was decided at the moment of its passage, the two of you were soulmates. The thought didn't terrify you as much as it might have previously. Maybe it was because you had gotten to know Midoriya like All Might had asked of you. Or, it could be because the universe was never wrong in its decisions of soulmates, and every moment of the day you felt a pull to be with this boy that was your perfect match. Beyond all that, your other choice was to deny it. Keep up the pretense of having a basic strength quirk. From what you understood, Midoriya's quirk damaged his body heavily. Whether it was because your version of it was weaker, or that you'd somehow worked out how to use it without hurting yourself. You could explain it away. He'd never seen your injuries from it. Dear, are you going to sit out here for the rest of the festival? The next round should be starting soon, and if you're not out on the field you'll be disqualified. Recovery Girl startled you out of your reverie, and Demonir screamed when her voice echoed in the empty hallway. Quickly, you tried to recover and looked pointedly over her head and down the hall. I'll go now. Thank you. As you stepped around her, she turned to look at you as you went. When you were a few meters down the hallway, she called after you, You can't keep hiding it, dear. Better to pull the bandage off quickly. Your footsteps stopped, and you couldn't help but hunch your shoulders in on yourself at her words. She wasn't wrong. Delaying it would only make it more and more difficult to approach the topic later. What would Midoriya say if you came to him a few years down the line and revealed that you'd been his soulmate all along? Hurt, angry, maybe a little betrayed. All of that and more, your thoughts supplied unhelpfully. It only served to make your heart squeeze in your chest. Instead of answering recovery girl, you walked away just a bit faster than before. Come closer and draw lots to see who you're up against. Your hand fished around in the box before your fingers curled around one that felt good enough. Midnight explained beforehand that the recreational games would be held first, and then the 16 finalists would begin the one-on-one tournament. Once she took stock of everyone's lots, the screen lit up to show who would be fighting in the first rounds. Your eyes scanned the board before landing on your name alongside another. The third match of the first round would be you against someone named Yayarozu. A hand landed on your shoulder just as Present Mike announced that the recreational games would begin, and you turned to see a black-haired female that you remembered being in Todoroki's group. That's you, right? I'm Yayarozu. I wanted to wish you a good match and that there's no hard feelings. Yeah, you too, you said dumbly as her lips quirked upward in a small smile before she walked away. As you watched her go, you couldn't help but wonder why in the hell she was wearing a cheerleader's costume. Unfortunately, the first fight would be against the last two people you'd hoped would be fighting against one another. Your soulmate and your best friend? How ridiculous. As one of the two non-hero core students to make it to the finals, your assigned seating area was blessedly empty. It made it easier to calm your nerves when you didn't have others around you to fill the air with chatter. Instead, the dull roar of the crowd was almost comforting, like white noise. Present Mike wasted no time once the arena was set up and went ahead introducing the two boys flamboyantly. You could only hope your introduction was just as hyped up. Bring on the injuries, 'cause we've got our very own recovery girl waiting on standby. Put those morals aside and don't be afraid to play dirty. But no. Life-threatening crap, folks. It's not allowed. Present Mix announcements served well to hype the crowd up. Your knee bounced anxiously as you leaned forward in your seat, elbows on your knees. You could only hope that someone had warned Midoriya about Shinsu's quirk, because you hadn't been able to in the brief break. If Midoriya answered him, it would be all over. Ready? Begin. Shinso was talking. You could see the movement of his mouth, even though it was too far to hear what was going on. The expressions on Midoriya's face varied between determination and anger, though as Shinso spoke it started to lean toward the latter. Don't fall for it, you mumbled into the hands cupped over your mouth that hid the anxious movements of your teeth against your lip. From one section over, you could barely make out the excited chatter of Midoriya's classmates, unknowing of what might come next. Midoriya started to run forward, only to stop in his tracks the second he started to yell, "Don't you talk about him that way." Shinsu's smirk was triumphant as he slid his hands into his pockets. You tilted your head down to rub your eyes with the palms of your hands. No one told Midoriya about it, that you felt bad, like maybe you should have tried a little harder to find him during the recreational games to tell him. But you were rooting for Shinso, too. Either way, you'd be feeling this crushing weight no matter who won and who lost. The crowd's murmuring forced you to lift your head up and watch as Midoriya turned on his heel and slowly started to walk toward the boundary of the stage. Present Mix commentary almost was distracting enough to keep you from noticing the glow of Midoriya's two fingers on his left hand. Before you realized what that meant, a blast of air exploded outward with him as the epicenter, and the immediate bruising of his fingers told you what you needed to know. He'd used one for all to break out of Shinsu's hold. You caught hold of your faculties before you let out a cheer, knowing that you really needed to try and remain neutral on this one. Still, you hid the smile on your face behind your hands as you leaned forward again. Midoriya should know now. He shouldn't fall for Shinsu's trick a second time. The resulting fight between the two was surprisingly basic, but without a physical quirk, Midoriya didn't need to call on one for all again to strong-arm Shinso out of the ring. The sound of Shinsu's fist smashing into Midoriya's cheek echoed through the arena above the sounds of the crowd cheering, but you were more focused on Midoriya's recovery and the way he pivoted his weight to swing Shinso in an arc over his head. Shinso is out of bounds. Midoriya is moving on to the next match. You had no right to feel this relieved, not when you knew how important this was to Shinso, but you slumped back in your seat with a long exhale. Midoriya was moving on with minimal injuries. And if he could do it, so could you. Your match was up next. You entered one of the private rooms to take a moment and regroup. You remembered Yaoyorozu's quirk seemed to allow her to create objects, but was there a limit? Did she have a fighting style with it that you could try to exploit? Maybe you should have paid a bit more attention. A knock on the door brought you out of your thoughts, and once you called for them to come in, the door opened to reveal Midoriya. He was smiling as he entered, though it didn't seem to reach his eyes at all. A quick glance showed that Recovery Girl had fixed him up, right down to the broken fingers on his left hand. Midoriya? I need to talk to you. Midoriya seemed to hesitate for a moment as he reached for the chair across from you, before he slowly pulled it out and sat down. As each second went on, you felt your blood run colder and colder. Midoriya was resolutely looking at the table, and the working of his jaw told you that he was choosing his next words. So, you waited. Your patience paid off, and though you knew it was coming, you still balled your hands into fists under the table as he spoke again. Have you met your soulmate? Are you sure we should be talking about something like that right now? You tried to veer him off that track, but green eyes quickly snapped up to look at you, and you were pushed back into silence. Yes, Midoriya urged, and he leaned back in his chair with a pinched expression on his face. Another long moment passed, and you tried to use it to think of some way to weasel out of this conversation, but Midoriya gathered his nerves first. You know I was born quirkless. And you only have a soulmate if you have a quirk. I'm sorry. Don't be, Midoriya urged with another smile that didn't reach his eyes. I came to terms with it. I wanted to be a hero, and I wanted a soulmate. Only one of those things I could still try to do without a quirk, so I just kind of accepted that maybe I'd be alone. Desperately, you wanted to blurt out that you felt that same way. Maybe the result wasn't the same. It seemed like he still had hope despite saying he'd accepted it. On the other hand, you'd given up and settled yourself into a life of only having yourself. Midoriya's eyes wandered to the table again, and one of his hands started to trace the scratches left there by previous participants of the festival. But I have a quirk now. Don't you think? Do you think it wouldn't be out of the question that's somewhere out there in the world? Midoriya trailed off as his hand stopped its movements and both balled into fists on the table. One for all is special, but what if someone else out there got it too? What if I was blessed with both of the things I wanted most in that moment with all might? Your head felt like it was going to explode with the blood rushing in your ears. If there was ever a time to say something, it would be now. Things were lined up perfectly. Midoriya's taken himself to the threshold. You just needed to guide him through the door. But what? You didn't know why you would pick the alternative, but maybe it was that lingering feeling of being alone and being comfortable in that space you made for yourself. If you thought about it, you could see that the road you were building ahead of you was slowly widening. Your silence seemed to unnerve Midoriya, because you could feel the vibrations of his knee hitting the top of the table gently as his leg bounced. Maybe I've been selfish, thinking of only me and what I've wanted so badly. If that really happened and someone else got one for all too, what have they been going through? To suddenly have a quirk that could tear their body apart? I trained for a year and still have trouble keeping it in check. I just wish that I knew who they were, if they even existed. Midoriya. You breathed, and after a half-hearted deliberation, you reached over to one of his balled fists to slip your fingers into his. I don't think you're selfish for wanting that. Everyone wants a soulmate at one point or another. And do you want your soulmate? Midoriya's question caught you off guard, and you gaped at him for a moment until his fingers squeezed yours. You blinked a few times before looking down at your laced hands that lay upon the table. I do. Want my soulmate? Those words carried a weight that you immediately felt lift from your shoulders. It felt like the rising sun as your courage picked up off the ground. Now was the time. Your heart sang in your chest as it beat faster, and your fingers curled around Midoriya's just a bit tighter as the words started to form on your tongue. I want you. Would the competitors of the third match please report to the arena? The words died on your lips as you looked at Midoriya's small, expectant smile. There was an emotion there that you weren't sure of, one that you hadn't seen on his face before. It made your heart clench tight again as you slipped your hand from his and got to your feet. Another time thing. He knows, you thought to yourself as you stood across the ring from Yaoyorozu, waiting for Present Mike to announce the beginning of the match. I should have told him. You couldn't get that sentence out of your head, even when Present Mic gave the go-ahead and Yaoyorozu formed 2 shields on her forearms while running across the arena. Maybe it's better this way, your heart grumbled deep in your chest as you stumbled back from a swing that Yaoyorozu had aimed at your head. Now isn't the time. You did your best to push thoughts of your soulmate out of your mind as you nearly tripped over your feet while dodging Yaoyorozu's punches. She had combat training, and a huge advantage over you. Landing a hit on her wouldn't work in your favor, not unless you pulled it one for all. You did it before, using one for all without hurting yourself, but what if you slipped up now? Yaoyorozu could get seriously injured, or you could break all your bones again. Neither of those consequences sounded great to you. However, losing wasn't something you were interested in doing either. As you frantically dodged her swings, your eye was caught by a crater in the ground off to the side, one that hadn't been fixed from the cavalry battle. In the back of your mind, you recalled that you were the one to make that, when you used one for all without damaging your legs beyond repair. It gave you an idea. You reached for what you could, curling your fingers into the surging heat of one for all and sweeping it over yourself like thick blanket. Your blood responded immediately, and the pressure of it running through your veins alongside your lifeblood felt like you were going to explode. Yaoyorozu's eyes widened for a moment, and across the skin of her face you could see light dancing across it just before you ducked from a wide swing she'd aimed at your head, intending on using the shield as a weapon. When your knee hit the ground, so did your fist. The backlash was immediate, and you could almost feel your teeth rattle in the sockets from the unexpected power you unleashed. Your original intention was to just rattle her a bit and shake the ground up, but you realized too late that maybe you had been greedy with the amount you had pulled from one for all. Initially, you thought the roaring in your ears was from the crowd, until you finally processed what had happened around you. The cement arena had been blown away, leaving only rubble in its place that spiraled outward to the walls that made up the main floor of the stadium. While the crowd had been loud, it was a combination of the violent movement of the winds around you and the blood rushing in your ears that made up the cacophony in your eardrums. Yaoyorozu is unable to fight. Midnight's announcement barely registered in your head as your senses came back to you. First, you felt one for all ebbing away like the tide going down, like it had been sated by your use of it and now it wanted to rest. Next, the pressure you'd been feeling inside waned until the only thing you could feel was pain. It radiated from the tips of your finger on your left arm up to your collarbone, though it was enough to feel like your whole body was affected. Faintly, through the pain you could realize that you had thrown up on the ruined cement in front of you, and your chest was heaving with the hard breaths you were taking. A few figures surrounded you, and you realized it was a few of Recovery Girl's assistants for the festival. Air left your clenched teeth with a hiss as you were hefted to your feet by your armpits, and your good arm was swung over the shoulders of one assistant. "We're taking you to the infirmary. You've won, but you need to be checked out before your next match." The one that wasn't helping you walk was talking to you slowly as the other started to guide you to the arena's entry doors with shambling steps. You could only nod absently, your mind solely focused on the pain of your arm that you cradled close to your chest. By the time you got to Recovery Girl's infirmary, you had gained enough of yourself back that you noticed Yaoyorozu was already situated on one of the cots and had been bandaged. She hadn't awoken yet, but you had a feeling the foredrip that had already been set up had a sedative in it. Her forehead had a bandage around it, and her arms were both in a sling across her chest. Recovery Girl was already waiting as you slowly sat in the bed across from your former opponent. Her disappointment was palpable as she started to feel around your arm amidst your complaints of the pain. Her only response was a glare, but then she burst into a lecture as she jabbed a finger into the tender skin of your forearm. "It wouldn't hurt if you hadn't been so reckless. I swear, it's something with one for all that takes all sense of self-preservation away from the three of you. I thought maybe you would have more sense than Toshinori and Midoriya, but apparently not. I didn't mean to." You argued as she stopped long enough to sigh and step away. You looked down at your arm as bruises bloomed across your skin, and wondered how badly you'd hurt yourself this time. That wasn't just an excuse, you truly didn't mean to pull so hard on one for all, but in the heat of the moment your grasping hands had too much of a reach. Recovery Girl returned from her nearby computer with a few supplies gathered in her arm. "Well, you may have won, but you won't be participating any further in the festival. Your arm is too damaged for me to heal you fully with my quirk, and I refuse to send you back out there with one for all and a damaged arm. Huh. You felt a bit dumb at that response as she laid out what looked to be the supplies to start an 4-line. Her response was delayed as she got things ready. Once she was satisfied, she turned to you with an alcohol swab. I'm going to put you under and use my quirk to heal you periodically. You'll recover quicker if you're not up and moving around. Before she could finish her explanation, the door slid open with enough force to rattle the generic pictures on the walls. In the doorway was the hulking figure of All Might in his muscle form, his gaze trained on you hunched over in the bed. Are you okay? Another figure squeezed through the space between All Might and the door frame, and it turned out to be Midoriya breathing heavily from the run between the bleachers and the infirmary. His eyes scanned over you frantically, and once he realized you weren't gravely injured, his shoulders relaxed visibly. I'm okay, I'm just a bit banged up. Present Mike said you were withdrawn. Midoriya took a few steps across the room to stand close enough to reach out for you. Just before his hand could touch your shoulder, he let it drop to his side. What you did out there, that was enough to injure them to the point of needing healing, so the two of you should head back out to your seats. Recovery Girl had enough of their shenanigans, and cut in before Midoriya could go any further. You couldn't see the expression on his face once he turned to look at her, but there was something to be said about the softening of the creases in Recovery Girl's forehead. Midoriya turned back to you, and you saw that expression full force. He looked helpless, like he wasn't quite sure what he should be doing. If you looked hard enough, the fluorescent lights in the room were reflecting just well enough to show the shine of tears in his eyes. Before you could process it, you reached to him with your uninjured hand and curled your fingers around his hand. I'll find you when I wake up again. His eyebrows furrowed, and his mouth opened to say something. Slowly, his fingers curled against yours just a bit tighter before he stepped away and let your hand go. I need to talk to you later. You pulled your lips between your teeth before nodding and letting your eyes fall to the floor. Yeah. Me too. You woke up a few hours later, the sky outside glowing orange from the setting sun. You realized that you'd been moved from the infirmary in the stadium to the familiar beds in the main office of Recovery Girl. She was humming a tune you weren't familiar with as she typed away on her computer, but her song stopped when you made a grunt while sitting up. You're awake. How are you feeling, dear? Tired, you answered honestly, rubbing the palm of your hand into your eye. How long was I out? A few hours. The sports festival has been finished for a while, now. Bakugo Katsuki was the winner. Somehow, you weren't surprised, even though you only saw him in action in the first 2 rounds. You wanted to ask about Midoriya, but she cut you off as she hopped off her rolling chair. Are you feeling well enough to walk? Oh yeah, you swung your legs off the side and slowly got to your feet, letting the dizzy feeling pass before you let go of the handrail. I should probably head out before it's too dark. You've got an escort, no need to worry. Make sure you eat a big meal tonight, or you'll be tired in the morning. All students have the next 2 days off, so get plenty of rest. As she lectured you, she held out a hand to offer you a piece of wrapped candy that looked like a strawberry. You took it with a bow and a thank you, but she waved you off and turned back to her desk. Get a move on, he's been waiting for a while now. You thanked her again before you left the room. Across the hallway was simultaneously the first and last person you wanted to see. When the door slid shut behind you, Midoriya's head snapped up from his phone and his mouth broke out into a smile. You're looking a lot better. I'm not really feeling like it. Yeah, I'm always tired after a healing session too. With that, Midoriya slid his phone in his pocket and bent down briefly to pick up both bags that were on the floor. You recognized one of them as yours, and reached out a hand to take it from him. Almost too quickly, he turned away just enough to keep it out of your reach. I'll carry it. Okay, you said blankly as he swung both bags over one shoulder. His smile returned again as he clutched the straps of the bags with each of his hands. Let's get you home. I bet you're ready for more sleep, huh? Something like that, you answered as he started to slowly walk down the hall, his pace increasing as you caught up with him. Absently, you rubbed your left elbow with your right hand, thinking about the events of the day and what all of it meant. Midoriya had to know something was up. Before Recovery Girl knocked you out, he was about to say something about your match, and before that, your conversation in the locker room was suspiciously spot on as well. You honestly expected him to bring it up right away, but instead he seemed content to walk by your side in silence with a small smile lingering on his lips. Your staring must have been obvious, because he turned to you with pink cheeks. Is there something on my face? I ate after class, but I didn't think. No, you interrupted him, and let your eyes fall to the arm you were cradling, your thumb tracing across the skin of your elbow thoughtfully, just thinking about some things, that's all. Do you want to talk about it? The tone in his voice suggested that there was more to that question than what meets the eye. He turned forward again, and the smile was gone. You stopped in your tracks, and it took him a few steps before he realized that you'd fallen behind. You'd left the building already and made it all the way to the front gates before his question had brought you to a halt. Behind Midoriya, the city stretched out from the hill that Yue resided on. He seemed to glow with the setting sun behind him, and it took your breath away as your eyes traced over his features when you realized that your soulmate was standing here, right in front of you. The soulmate you dreamed about as a child, even more than your quirk. Midoriya's eyebrows raised as he turned fully to look at you, and it took everything inside of you to not blurt the truth outright. You wanted to be tactful about it, though you were convinced that he already knew. There's no way he was that dense, right? Are you okay? More than okay, you thought to yourself as you scanned his face and finally allowed yourself to truly take him in. Freckles scattered over his cheeks, cheeks that were starting to flush pink again as he realized you were staring at him so openly. His hair still glowed in the slowly setting sun, and your fingers itched to reach for it and run your fingers through the messiness of it. The smile that spread across his mouth was turning from curiosity to nervousness as you couldn't bring yourself to say anything. It was the first step he took toward you that broke you from your trance, and you blurted out the words you'd told him hours ago. I do want my soulmate, Midoriya. This stopped his forward advance. The hand he'd been holding out to you hovered limply in the air like he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do next. His eyebrows furrowed while he slowly dropped his hand back to his side, his fingers clenching into a fist. Do you know who they are? Yes. You breathed, and you weren't expecting the expression of hurt to cross his face. If you focused, you could probably hear your heart breaking at just the sight of it. His shoulders were shaking when he dipped his head to start to rub at his eyes with his sleeve. Was he crying? I'm sorry, I had hoped. I don't know what I hoped, actually. His voice was weak from trying to hold back tears, and when he looked up from his sleeve, the expression on his face was one you don't think you'd ever forget. Especially considering the words that came next. I like you. I like you more than I should, and I know it's hopeless because you have a soulmate and I don't, but I don't know. I don't know. Midoriya turned a half step away, and it clicked in your brain what was going on here. You'd read everything wrong, and Midoriya had no clue. He had no clue about the truth of the situation, and you'd really fumbled the moment. His sleeve came up to hide his tears again as he spoke. I thought maybe it was you, that you had somehow been my soulmate, but you knew about One for All and All Might. It didn't make sense why you wouldn't have said something already. Because I was scared, you blurted, and you wanted to reach out into the air and force those words back into your mouth. Midoriya looked at you with wide eyes as his brain rolled over the words you'd accidentally said in your haste to comfort him. Even when you could visibly see he understood, his expression didn't change to happiness, but only that heartbreak again. I was scared and I didn't want to tell you because You paused and tried to organize your excuses into something that didn't sound so selfish. It didn't work, and the only thing you could do was explain things truthfully. Please understand, Midoriya. I came to terms with being alone, and I planned for it. I finally was okay with it, and then I wind up with a quirk I didn't ask for or even know how to use. And then I find out it's your quirk too. What would you have done? I would have told you. Midoriya's voice cracked as he answered your question loudly, no longer bothering to hide his face. Instead, the tears fell freely as he gestured wildly in the air between the two of you. I would have said something because despite how we were born, the universe brought us together anyway. Because my whole life I wanted you, and then both of the things I wanted most were given to me. His words fell heavily between you as he hiccuped, his eyebrows contorting together as he tried to control his breathing. You whispered his name, afraid to say it any louder, but he still heard it and grabbed the cloth of his shirt over his heart, and even though I knew you must have had a soulmate out there, I thought that maybe if things had been different and I was born with a quirk, maybe it could have been you that I was destined to be with. I'm sorry, Midoriya. You urged, and stepped forward to reach out for him like your heart was urging you to do. You missed as he took a stumbling step backward, out of your reach once more. You reached a hand out again, but didn't move forward as you tried to reason with him. I wanted to get to know you, to try and ease myself into the thought that you were the one I was meant to be with. Please, Midoriya. You don't have to beg me for anything. Midoriya seemed to hunch in on himself as his gaze turned downward. Why, you're my soulmate. I'd give you anything you asked for. Even after all this. I've already forgiven you. The air left your lungs in one long breath, and you slowly walked forward again to reach for him. This time, he didn't back away, and instead let you wrap your arms around his torso and rest your forehead on his shoulder. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you, Midoriya said into the side of your head as his arms slowly moved to return your embrace. His breath tickled across your ear as he spoke, the pressure of his hands across your back comforting the ache you were feeling inside. I loved you before I even knew I could have you. Even when I knew who you were, I knew that if you were mine somehow, despite all odds, I loved you. Your sharp intake of breath was your only response, and Midoriya seemed to slump against you as he continued on. When I was a child, I put together all sorts of scenarios on how I would meet my soulmate if I had been allowed to have one. I thought about how lucky I would be to have someone I could give my heart to completely. You were stunned into silence by his declaration, long enough for him to finally sniffle and pull away to wipe his face on his already damp sleeve. His eyes were red-rimmed as he looked at you with a tearful smile that finally looked happy instead of heartbroken. You don't have to say it back. I understand why you kept it a secret. I just wish I knew sooner, that's all. You wanted to apologize again, but you knew it would be futile. Instead, you gave him a small smile of your own and tried to convey your feelings through that. It seemed to be enough, because Midoriya reached for your hand and curled his fingers around yours. Let's get you home. So, you told him. I did, you answered, resting your elbows on the chest-high wall that surrounded your front lawn. On the other side was All Might in his smaller form, dressed rather nicely for being on break from you. You knew why he had the suit and tie on. He'd come over this morning after the sports festival yesterday to speak with your parents officially about your transfer into the hero course. They'd been concerned about you since they watched the festival yesterday and clearly saw that you had developed a quirk despite never having one before. Of course, they relented almost immediately when All Might arrived in his muscle form to convince them rather easily. It was still the early morning, and after they left for work, All Might returned to speak with you about other matters. You raised one hand to prop your chin on it and looked down the road instead of directly at him. Did he take it well? I haven't heard from him since yesterday afternoon. It was difficult at first. I didn't mean to, but it slipped and here we are. At your words, All Might's eyebrows furrowed for a moment before he turned to lean against the wall to your right, letting out a tired sigh. It's better that he knows, you'll see. I feel weird about it, honestly. You know he's a good kid. It's not that. You interrupted him before he could start on the lecture about Midoriya's merits. What do I do? Should I call him? Do we have to be lovey-dovey now? How do you even go about all this, All Might? Things will take their natural course, you'll see. Nothing has to be different. Just proceed with your friendship and let things happen. You felt a bit lighter at All Might's words, but your cell phone in your pocket was a weight that you were hyper-aware of. You really should call Midoriya, or at least send him a text message in response to the one you woke up to asking how you were feeling. It was sweet and didn't betray any further expectation beyond your usual dynamic of friendship. All Might pushed off the wall and turned to lay a thin hand on your shoulder. Everything will be fine. Don't think too hard on it, kid. I'll try not to. Thanks, All Might. Of course, you know how to reach me if you need anything. I'd better be off. There's a few more things that need to be done for the school today. You waved at him as he started to walk away, and spent a moment staring at his back as he grew smaller. When he turned the corner toward the train station, you turned forward and propped your chin on your hand again. Your neighborhood was on the smaller side, and mostly lined in older homes like the one you lived in with your parents. Each house was neatly maintained, with a few local shops dotted here and there between them. It was nice, you liked the older architecture, and its lack of attractions didn't bring many sightseers or foot traffic beyond locals. That's why when you saw a figure out of the corner of your eye coming from the opposite direction that All Might left in, you noticed immediately. You also realized who it was in that same moment. You could spot that green hair from miles away, but his distance of only a block made it easy to recognize Midoriya Izuku. Once he realized you were looking at him, he brightened and picked the pace up. Clutched in his hand was a bag that looked like something you would store food in to keep it temperature controlled, and he set it down next to the wall you were leaning against once he was close enough. Hey, I came over to ask if maybe you wanted to spend some time together? You didn't answer my message, so I hope this isn't too much. Your eyes drifted to the bag, and Midoriya bent down to pick it up again. I made us breakfast, if you haven't eaten already. I thought maybe we could go to a park or something? Vaguely, you realized you hadn't given him an answer. You straightened up from your leaning position and brushed the front of your shirt off from any wood debris that rubbed off from the garden wall. That sounds good. Let me grab my bag and keys. Okay. Midoriya chirped a bit too quickly, his face turning a bit pink once he realized. You couldn't help but smile a bit as you turned to enter the house and look for walking shoes and your belongings. He was just too sweet, and you took note of the gentle skipping of your heart. Maybe things wouldn't be so difficult, after all. The park you took him to was near your house, only a 15-minute walk that was filled with idle chatter, mostly from Midoriya. You told him about All Might coming, and how you'd be joining the hero course following the short break that all students were given after the festival. Midoriya was ecstatic at this, his face split by a wide grin that he didn't bother to hide. So, I'll get to see you every day then? Well, during school at least, you responded without thinking too hard about it, and Midoriya's grin fell slightly. Regret fell over your shoulders like a long familiar blanket once you realized what he truly meant by that question. Offhandedly, you couldn't help but feel like hurting Midoriya in one way or another was what you seemed to be best at. Oh, I thought maybe we could, spend more time together? We are, soulmates. You filled in for him, and he nodded quietly as he pointedly looked at the ticket machine for the park and punched in numbers for an adult admission, and then another for you without asking. Instead of arguing, you accepted the slip of paper and followed him into the park to find a place to set up for your food. You waited until the blanket was laid out and Midoriya opened both bentos and drinks to answer him. I like spending time with you, Midoriya. I'm not used to this. I get it. Midoriya's small smile around the rim of his drink made your heart jump. I don't want to be annoying or clingy, but I really like you. Even before I knew about all of this, I liked seeing you and being around you. I'm sorry, is that weird? Each word he said slowly reddened his face until he practically buried himself in the high collar of his sweatshirt. Unexpectedly, you laughed and reached a hand out to try and pull one of his arms from covering his head. Don't be embarrassed. It's not weird. I liked you. I still do. That's a relief. Thanks. Your words brought him out of hiding, and he focused on the bento box that he pulled into his lap. I'm so afraid of messing this up. You shouldn't be. I already messed up the most. There's nothing that could be worse. Your tone was slightly bitter as you looked at your own boxed food and tapped on the lip with the tips of your fingers. Midoriya said nothing for a long moment, but the sight of his hand reaching out to grab yours caught your eye. It's in the past. We can just work on the now, okay? Midoriya tried to be encouraging with his words and smile, but you still felt guilty inside. Nonetheless, you let him take your hand into his own and squeeze it once. Midoriya's eyes were focused on your hands linked together, and you noticed that he had started to get a bit clammy as his cheeks heated up again. Is everything okay? Midoriya? The pink flush turned to red as he looked upward at the sky to avoid your eyes. You're the first person I've ever really held hands with? or really did anything. Like this. Well, that was pretty cute. Your smile was a bit conspiratorial as you leaned toward him to speak. Me too. Wide eyes looked at you as his hand fell limp in yours. Really? Yeah, we're both new at it, so you don't have to be so worried, okay? It was your turn to squeeze his hand to comfort him, and you only let him go so you could turn to the food he'd brought for you and take care of the growling in your stomach. Midoriya's shaking hands trying to hold his chopsticks was the most endearing thing you'd seen all year. Let's talk. You had no clue what this could be about, considering you'd spilled the beans and no longer needed him to be breathing down your neck, but you acquiesced to All Might's request and joined him in one of the private meeting rooms on campus. You'd arrived to sign some final paperwork for your transfer between courses, but he'd managed to intercept you before you could get too far. The meeting room was set up more like a living room. There was a small television sitting next to a radio under the window on a chest of drawers. In the middle of the room sat two couches that faced each other over a coffee table. It was nice, despite the looming talk and or lecture you would be getting. You sat across from All Might slowly, letting him sip the thermos he had with him a few times before finally breaking the ice. Is there something specific we should be talking about? Yes, I'm just thinking of the right way to approach it. Let's see. He paused to set the thermos down and lean back against the couch. Relief seemed to smooth over his brow as he eased into the cushions. During your fight with Yaoyorozu Momo in the sports festival, you used one for all. Before that, you used it quite a few times without hurting yourself too drastically. Is it safe for me to assume you have some modicum of control? Only if I use a small amount, you answered quickly, unwilling to give him the wrong idea. I guess if I had to estimate, 1% is all I can really control before it starts to get serious. As serious as what you called upon during your fight. Miss Yaoyorozu is doing fine, she's recovered nicely and there aren't any lasting injuries. You did quite a number on her, and speaking of numbers, he trailed off, and you picked up quickly that he was wanting another percentage spouted at him. An estimate of what you pulled on in that adrenaline-filled moment. Racking your brain, you tried to remember how it felt to surge with that much power in comparison to the minor pulsing of using it at such a low velocity. Phantom pains traveled down your arm as you recalled the greedy handfuls you had yanked from the power source inside of you. You wanted to blurt out 100%, but you knew using one for all like that would blow you apart. If anything, compared to the feeling of using it normally, you could say, 5%, I think. It was more than I should have tried to take, and it should have hurt me worse. How do you normally control it at 1%? Like a blanket? Or maybe like sinking into a bathtub and letting it cover me completely? It's so hard to explain, but I don't concentrate it in one spot, I let it just go where it wants to. All Might hummed, bony arms crossing over his chest as he looked over your shoulder in thought. After a moment he spoke, 1% is more than enough to suffice for now, but I'd like to continue our training together. Your groan cut him off, but he powered through it with an exasperated look. It's not like I'm going to kill you, kid. It's for your own good, I'm the only one that can really help you with this. Midoriya will be there, since you don't have to hide it from him anymore. That shut you up. You agreed. Monday morning was just like any other day. You woke up, put your uniform on, ate your breakfast, and left. At the station, you messaged Midoriya that you had arrived, and he appeared almost as soon as the message indicated that it had been read. Things deviated from there, specifically the topic of your conversation. Are you excited? To be in a new class, I mean. I'm gonna be honest with you, Midoriya. Not really. His own excitement seemed to deflate the smallest amount, but he forced his smile wider and grabbed onto the straps of his backpack like a lifeline. It'll be better than you expect. I know it. You're gonna love it. You weren't convinced, but you only hummed a response as the two of you climbed onto the next train that pulled into the station. It was more crowded than usual today, so your conversation fell to the wayside in favor of scanning your phones for news. Your name popped up on one of the first articles, calling you the explosive underdog from the general course. You'd seen these articles before, claiming that you were an unexpected outlier in a hero course-dominated finals. Apparently, you weren't the only one to read these. A quiet gasp cut through your trance and you looked up to see an older woman, her hair pulled back neatly and dressed in a pantsuit. Painted lips turned up into a smile as she clasped her hands together. "You're that kid from the sports festival. And you're Midoriya. You two did great out there." Embarrassed, you nodded a thank you while Midoriya stammered something. The woman must have been loud enough for others to hear, because praises started to come from all directions, talking about how proud they were to have aspiring heroes like the two of you, how wonderful your fights had been. It was stifling. You hated it, and you wanted to disappear, but Midoriya seemed to be humming with excitement with each passing word. Of course, he would be embarrassed, but you knew he was soaking it up. Midoriya actually wanted to be a hero, unlike you. Of course, he would enjoy this. The stop just outside you didn't seem to arrive fast enough, and as soon as the train pulled in you grabbed Midoriya and cooked it out of that train, pushing past people carelessly. Fingers curled around your own as you stepped onto the platform, and you realized that in your haste you had grabbed his hand instead of the elbow that you had intended to. "Are you okay?" His voice had a worried pitch to it, and when you looked over your shoulder you could see that his eyebrows were furrowed to match his words. The tension in your shoulders relaxed, and after seeing this Midoriya hesitantly squeezed your hand once in reassurance. "It was a bit much, I agree. I'm sure it gets easier, right?" "Yeah. Probably," you absently agreed as your eyes zeroed in on your clasped hands. Midoriya seemed to realize what you were staring at, and after a moment of silence he went to pull his hand away sheepishly. Instead, you gripped him tighter and turned to walk to the school. Before you could get too far out of the station, Midoriya pulled you to a stop again. "Hey, wait a sec." "Huh." A dumb response, you felt, but Midoriya's mouth turned into a shy smile before he looked pointedly at the ground between the two of you. I'm not ashamed of you or us, but do you want to keep it a secret, still? That we're soulmates?" "Yeah," Midoriya trailed off, and he steeled his shoulders before looking to you with resolution. "I'll do what you want. But maybe it's safer for us to keep it secret. At least until we can both control our quirk. Having one instance of one for all in the world is dangerous, but two? Midoriya paused again, his eyes flickering back and forth between yours as he searched for something. He seemed to have found it because his lips turned upward into a hesitant smile. "I feel selfish because I want to show you off, that you're mine, but I want you to be comfortable and happy with it too, especially since." He cut himself off there, but he didn't need to finish. The unsaid words hung between the two of you and you felt guilt curling at the edges of your heart. Almost impulsively, you wanted to tell him it didn't need to be hidden. Sure, you wanted to show the world you had a soulmate, but something inside of you wanted to instinctively reassure him that you weren't having second thoughts about this whole thing. Midoriya seemed to see your inner turmoil because he tentatively reached for your other hand, now holding both between the two of you. "You're thinking too hard about it, I think. Maybe. Let's just start with keeping it secret and come back to it later. If that's what you want." "If that's what you want," Midoriya urged, suddenly a bit bolder than he has been so far. "I want what you want, okay? So let's just take it slow like you wanted to, okay?" That sounds good. You breathed, and Midoriya's tension dropped immediately with the presence of his smile. One last squeeze was shared between your hands before he let them go, instead grabbing onto his backpack straps like a safety net. "We should go, we're gonna be late." "But we still have 45 minutes. That's not what Ida says. Ida, as it turns out, was the class representative of 1A, and the boy with the engines on his legs that you remembered from the sports festival. In fact, you remembered a lot of the faces that stared back at you when you entered the room behind Midoriya. Silence reigned for almost a full minute before a voice rang out. "You're the new student. Wow, I should have known." Uraraka appeared immediately, a sunny smile on her face as she jumped from her desk to gush over you. That seemed to break the tension, and a few other voices joined the fray, asking questions and introducing themselves. Your voice was barely able to break over it to call your own name out, but it seemed to have gone unnoticed. "Enough messing around, get in your seats." That was a voice you vaguely knew, and you realized that it belonged to your new sensei once you turned to the door. He paid you no mind, shuffling into the room to his desk. The other students hurried to their desks, leaving you standing awkwardly at the front of the classroom. You'd met Aizawa briefly during your meeting with All Might, but he still introduced himself before gesturing to the back of the room in the far corner where what seemed to be another desk was added haphazardly. Take your seat. We've got a lot to cover today. That was all the indication you needed. Thankfully, you'd been given a bit of reprieve when it came to choosing your hero name, considering you hadn't planned on joining this course in the first place. However, you weren't given a choice on taking an internship. Aizawa passed out everyone's packets, and though you had a couple pages of names thanks to your explosive performance, one of them stood out to you immediately. You sought him out at lunch and found him in the faculty's office, almost like he was expecting you. Of course, he would be. You sat in the seat at his desk next to him and followed his lead to pull your lunch out. After a long moment, he spoke. I figured I'd leave it up to you, kid. Picking my own internship? I guess I appreciate that, but you had to know I'd just pick you, All Might. You know about One for All, you're the best person to train me. Don't let that influence you. These internships are about more than just learning about your quirk. It's about watching a hero at work and learning the day-to-day operations. All Might seem to chide you a bit for your assumption, and you sulked into your bento box before he continued. I requested you so you could have the option. If you accept an internship with me, we'll mostly work on One for All since I can only patrol a few hours per day. I won't be offended if you choose to learn under another teacher this week. Setting your chopsticks down, you picked up the packet and scanned through the names. There were quite a few smaller-time heroes, but you were surprised to see quite a few that you recognized. Death Arms? Fat Gum? Sir Nightai? Almost immediately, the pages were snatched out of your hand as All Might looked them over with frantic eyes. They landed on one of the last names in the list, and his eyebrows rose almost comically. Sir Nightai? That's unexpected. Really, really unexpected. Why is that? I think that's a story for another time, kid. Nightai has probably taken on as many interns as I have as All Might, which is next to none. Notoriously difficult, but he's a good teacher. I don't think you'd be wrong to learn under him. He's very by the books when it comes to regular hero business. You gently took the packet of papers back and looked at the name there. Sir Night. You knew of him. He was one of the more well-known heroes, despite not being in the Big Ten list. His success rates for apprehending criminals using his agency were phenomenal. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to accept his offer. I'll think on it. You promised him, and All Might's expression was unreadable as he nodded and packed his food up. I should probably go find young Midoriya. There are some things I need to talk about with him and his internship. Have a good first day, kid. You followed him out of the staff room but stopped in the hallway and watched him practically jog away. Something about Nightai was unsettling him, but you couldn't tell what it was. It wasn't enough to deter him from suggesting you accept that offer, but if he didn't even want to tell you, maybe something went down. The papers crinkled in your tensed hands as you walked away. Hey, are you ready to head out? You lifted your head from your phone and stared up at Midoriya's smile for only a moment before giving him a hesitant one of your own. In your hand, your phone buzzed again and the screen showed a thumbs-up emoji, confirming that All Might had read your message. I can't today, Midoriya. Sorry. I have to stay after school for a bit to try and catch up. You hoped he got the meaning of your words, and you didn't try to hide what your phone said. As the movement of your arm to uncover the screen, his eyes glanced at it to read the messages. Meet me in training room Gamma. The thumbs-up was the answer to your simple 2 letters, and the contact name only had a flexing arm as the indicator of who it was. It seemed OTB obvious to Midoriya, because he nodded sagely despite the deflating of his shoulders. Will I see you tomorrow, then? I could just wait for you to be done so you don't have to walk home alone. You wanted to blurt out that he could stay, but your not love-struck brain squashed that down as you shook your head. I should be fine getting home, thanks though. If you want, I can text you when I get home. That seemed to soothe over his worry as he smiled again, though his eyes were sheepishly pointed at your desk. I'd like that. Training with All Might was largely similar to those weekend mornings on Dagoba Beach, but the makeshift weights of home appliances were instead replaced with actual dumbbells, machines, and some strange contraption with a large square pad on it that seemed to be reinforced by a steel bar that attached to a machine. One of the machine's sides held a screen that was blank for now, but you had a feeling you'd find out what that was soon. First, he took you to the weight machines to get a feel for what you could do without using one for all in any capacity. Still, as you strained against the weight he set for you, it felt like your blood came alive. Like every nerve in your body was firing off at max capacity and still strained to go further than what their limits allowed. Let it go. Let's see what you've learned. You wanted to fight back and tell him no. Every time you unleashed one for all, it broke you. You were scared of this power, but you thought back to what Shinso told you in the break room at the sports festival, the silly analogy he'd given to you of spreading it like butter on toast. Sourdough, he called you. Carefully, struggling to keep the weights from clanging back down, you reached for that power in your chest and let it slip out. If you concentrated, you could probably feel the path it took through your veins, starting from your heart and branching out to the very capillaries in the tips of your fingers. Overburdened, like you needed to move, to get that energy out of your body because if you didn't it would kill you. But in the same breath you felt power. Powerful like you could move mountains if you wanted to. It was a rush that set your heart racing, and despite terror in your chest you also wanted more. Almost like he sensed your thoughts, All Might's voice centered you again. Use only what you need, not what you want. Remember the consequences, kid. It felt like you were pulled from underwater, and your thoughts cleared at his words. Don't get greedy, you admonished yourself as you focused on the thrum in your bones and the rushing in your ears. Use what you need, not what you want. Easy like breathing, you lifted the weights with an exhale. Weights that you hadn't been able to lift more than an inch before were at the end of the machine's range of motion for you. You felt like you could do more. Like you could lift the entire machine itself off the floor and, that's enough, let it go. With a gasp, you let the weights go with a loud clang, wincing at the noise as your muscles throbbed. Like it was sated, the pulsing in your veins seemed to subside backward in the path it took, curling protectively in your chest like some sleeping demon. You wanted to hate it, but it felt good, better than a lot of what you felt before. In the same breath, your muscles ached viciously, like you'd done too much work in too short a time. It was enough to ground you again, your thoughts veering from that strange exhilaration to the reality you were now struggling to stand in. Well, felt good. Any aftereffects? How much did you use? How did it feel? All Might seemed to be excited at this, and you rubbed your elbow a bit self-consciously at being the center of his attention. Sore. I think I went a bit far, but I didn't break anything. That was, I don't know, maybe 2%? Maybe more. Less than 5. Definitely, you agreed, and All Might seemed to nod in understanding as he checked the weights for any damage from their free fall that you allowed them to enter. After assuring they were fine, he took you to that strange machine you saw when you entered. This was specifically built to test the force behind those who hold strength quirks. You want me to punch it? Eventually this. But one of the main injuries that come from beginners is that they use incorrect form. I've watched your fight a few times from the sports festival, and I won't lie to you. It needs work. It's not like I actually have fought anyone before. You argued indignantly as he moved over to the screen on the machine and made it were to life. After a few moments of fidgeting with it, he turned back to you and in the span of a breath, he bulked up into his muscle form. This machine was built to withstand thousands of pounds of force. Though it can't handle one for all in its full capacity, it should do fine for the little amount that you can work with. Hey! It's not an insult, it's just the truth. Now, observe. I'll go quickly, then we'll walk through it slowly together. When you returned home that night, you felt like you were going to melt the moment you laid face down on your bed. All Might was a SLV driver, but combining that with using this scary but quirk was even worse. Shower, you grumbled to yourself in an effort to convince your beaten body get off the bed, but your phone caught your attention first. Of course, you had forgotten until now. With fingers that felt like they were made of lead, you unlocked it and navigated to your Messenger app. There was a message already waiting, and you opened it to see that it was from the exact boy you'd been thinking of. I hope training went well and you're home safe. You tapped out a quick answer, explaining that you just got home and were hopping in the shower quickly. Midoriya didn't answer you by the time you exited, and you wrapped the towel around yourself to keep yourself decent in the walk from the bathroom to your bedroom. Before leaving the bathroom, you pressed the call button in the Messenger app. Almost immediately, he answered, and he stammered out a hello that sounded absolutely embarrassed. Midoriya? You okay? Why, just, I wasn't expecting you to call me. Oh. Well, you didn't answer me by the time I got out, so I figured I'd just call. You answered simply as you opened your closet to look for something casual to wear. Midoriya didn't say anything, but the receiver was picking up his shaky breaths as he seemed to be overthinking everything. What are you doing? Jay, just finishing homework. That's all. That seemed weird, but you shrugged it off and set the phone on your nightstand to put it on speakerphone while you changed. Do you know who you're picking for your internship? Actually, yeah. Changing the subject seemed to calm him down, judging by the tone of his voice. After pulling a new shirt over your head, you moved to your desk to start your own homework for the night. Midoriya continued after a moment of silence, I'm going to go with Gran Torino, actually. I think I've heard of him? Maybe. You responded, punctuating the end of your sentence with the thud of your textbook on your desk. I can't remember, though. That's okay, he was the one who showed All Might how to use One for All, originally. That struck a chord with you. Another of All Might's acquaintances. You didn't answer him for a moment, absently looking at the abstract art on the cover of your math book. Midoriya, thankfully, continued, I think it'll be good for me. Do you know who you're going with? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I do. Another training session with All Might was what you needed to finally start shaking that fear of what lingered in your bones. Midoriya was excited to hear about the progress you were making with it, and he assured you that his training with Gran Torino would bring him up to speed with your progress, so you shouldn't be too afraid to brag when you came home and your muscles didn't feel quite so sore as the last time. Hero training, that was another story. Being so far behind the others in terms of hand-to-hand combat experience and the other basic maneuvers used when it came to combat and rescue, it made it difficult during the afternoons when you tried to follow along with the exercises Aizawa and All Might laid out for the class. You weren't failing, you wouldn't settle for that, but it still seemed like you struggled at points. When Bakugo sent you flying with an over-the-shoulder throw during your spar, when Todoroki easily captured you in his ice, when you broke your leg after jumping a bit too forcefully with One for All. Aizawa wasn't pleased with this, and you earned a lecture as Recovery Girl's bots came out with a stretcher to take you to the infirmary. Seriously, rein it in. We don't need another Midoriya running around hurting themselves at every turn. Of course, he was right. It's not like you wanted to break yourself, but in the heat of the moment, you got greedy. All Might's words from your training session became something like a personal mantra throughout any sparring or training sessions. Use what you need, not what you want. And maybe it was a bit satisfying seeing the look on Bakugo's face when you managed to plant a fist square in his gut that was backed by almost a full % of power. His swearing as he climbed from the dirt made you feel like maybe you hadn't started off so far behind, after all. Everyone has their costumes, right? You clutched that briefcase in your fist just a bit tighter. Your costume finished right on time, though you only had time to try it on instead of test it out. Still, Aizawa assured you that it was really only to get you used to wearing it, and it wouldn't see any action during this week if all went to plan. Make sure you mind your manners with the other heroes during your internships. Now get to it. Don't be late. Yes, sir. After the unified answer from yourself and your classmates, you turned on your heel to head to the train station that would take you where you needed to go. Before you got too far, a hand curled around your elbow to stop you in your tracks, and you turned to see Midoriya standing behind you with the smallest of smiles. I just wanted to say goodbye, since we won't be seeing each other all week. Your heart leapt to your throat as the sight of the pink flush that started to overtake the apples of his cheeks. His eyes darted between yours, looking for something that you weren't sure he would find. You hoped it was the affection you were feeling, because you weren't going to be able to voice it properly. Not somewhere like this, at least. Oh, yeah, of course. You turned to him fully and tried to offer smile back, one that you hoped said what you weren't able to with your words, be safe. I know how reckless you are. Don't overdo it. I'll try. That's not very reassuring, but okay. You resisted the urge to roll your eyes, and instead took a quick glance around the station. None of your classmates were nearby, so you took the chance to step forward and tuck your arms around his torso, pulling him into a quick hug. His spine stiffened the moment you got too close, and it was accentuated by the sound of his costume's briefcase hitting the floor beneath you. Almost like he was scared, he returned the hug. His palms had to be sweating at this point, and if you lifted your chin from his shoulder you were willing to bet all the money in your wallet that he was as red as a tomato. Yeah, that sight would get you through the week. Seriously, be careful. Worry about you. Entirely on accident, your lips brushed his ear as you spoke, and you were sure that he was about to implode at this point. Before he could even respond, there was a chime overhead announcing the arrival of your train. Carefully, you slipped out of his hold, your hands running down his arms with each step backward you took, stretching out that moment of physical contact under your fingers slipped out of reach. Then, you scooped up your own bags and hurried onto the train. You expected to be this nervous as you stared up at the agency in front of you. You didn't need the address tucked into your pocket, you knew you were in the right place. That wasn't the source of your nervousness. It was the words that All Might said to you in the staff room over a week ago. Notoriously difficult. All Might didn't explain how difficult he was, but if even All Might could describe someone that way, you weren't sure why you wrote his name down on your sheet, it just felt like the right thing to do. Like you needed to, and if you didn't it would cause this weird disappointment that you weren't quite sure where it sourced from. Oh hey, are you the new student? You'd even near jumped out of your skin, turning a half step on your left to spot who had addressed you. Then, you had to crane your neck up to really get a look at this blonde guy with the wide smile. His eyebrows rose expectantly, and you quickly nodded once before blurting your name. Like he expected it, he planted one hand on his hip and pointed his other thumb at his chest. I'm Togata Mirio, but just Mirio works. I'm doing my work study with Sir Night-Eye. I've heard a lot about you the past couple weeks. Your match in the sports festival was great. Oh, thank you. I wish I had been able to do more. That felt like a lie, but you didn't try to backtrack. Mirio didn't seem to notice the hesitation in your answer, and instead gestured with a hand for you to follow him into the building you'd been staring at for the past 15 minutes. I think you did just fine. Sir wouldn't have put in an offer to mentor you this week if you'd been anything other than excellent. That made you feel a little bit better, actually. You followed Mirio's lead as he held the door open for you and then stepped into the lobby after you did. It was kinda plain, but then you remembered the Googling you'd done of Sir Night-Eye before today and realized that it just fit with the aesthetic. Just past the main desk was a spiraling staircase that Mirio made a beeline toward. Look, you're already accepted as the intern for this week, but I don't think it would be a bad idea if you made a good, lasting impression on Sir, get it? Kind of, you answered, following him up the stairs at a leisurely pace that matched his own. How do I do that? Beyond just buckling down and doing your best. Sir really enjoys humor, despite outward appearances. Humor? I don't even make my friends laugh. How am I supposed to make someone like him do it? You groaned as your head lolled back. It jostled your balance a bit, but you righted yourself and took the stairs a little quicker to catch up with Mirio. His response to all of this was to laugh, and that felt a little encouraging for what was to come. I think you'll be just fine. Just relax. I am relaxed, you grumbled through a frown as you reached the top floor. The outward-facing wall was covered with windows, and you realized you'd climbed rather high during the strange pep talk Mirio had given you. Instead of lingering too long, he took you down one of the nearby hallways that held a single door at the very end. Well, this is it. Ready? No, but if I mess around any longer, I'll be late. That's the spirit. All right, let's go. Before you could respond any more, Mirio knocked twice on the door and received an answer almost immediately. The door swung open and Mirio walked in without preamble, leaving you to slowly enter on your own. If you didn't know any better, you would think you stepped in Midoriya's paradise. The walls held framed posters of All Might merchandise. The shelves seemed to hold photographs and books detailing All Might's successes. All in all, this guy was a huge fanboy. The sound of Mirio's voice cut through your examination, and you turned to see him standing in front of a desk that Sir Night-Eye himself was seated at. Thank you, Mirio. You can head out for now. I'd like to speak with them privately. Sure thing, sir. I'll find Bubble Girl for now. Mirio only received a nod in return, and after clapping you on the shoulder with an encouraging hand, he left you alone with Sir Night-Eye. Silence dragged on between you, the only sound being your clothing shifting as you fidgeted from foot to foot. Should you say something? Is this where you were supposed to crack a joke to make him laugh? In a panic, you opened your mouth to speak, but he finally cut you off. My quirk. How much do you know about it? You can see someone's future by touching them. That's a rudimentary explanation, but I suppose it will do. Night-Eye stood from his chair and you realized that this man dwarfed even Mirio. His gaze was cold as he stared down at you over the desk, and after a long moment of making you extremely terrified, he reached a hand out to you, palm up. It didn't take a genius to see what he was asking. Of course, he was giving you the option, but you had the feeling that if you declined, you'd be throwing this internship out the window. So, you obliged, reaching a hand out to lay your palm across his. You expected something to happen, but instead he snapped his fingers a few times to get you to look him in the eye. Then, faintly, his right eye glowed purple for a brief moment. So, my suspicions were correct. Night-Eye pulled his hand away and let it come to rest on the desk to lean against it almost casually. Your eyebrows twitched in question for just a moment, but he picked up on it right away because he continued, seeing your quirk at the sports festival arose some interesting theories, but having seen this, you really were just some innocent bystander, weren't you? Unknowingly, you were pushed into something you didn't want. He meant One for All. It wasn't a secret that he was once All Might's sidekick. There's no way he didn't know about One for All and All Might's current plight with his injuries. He knew All Might chose a successor, and you were roped into all of this without wanting or knowing it. Not wrong, you confirmed, and Night-Eye searched your eyes for a long moment before he slowly sat back down in his office chair. Long fingers tapped against the surface of his desk for a moment before he reached for a file on his desk. I took the liberty of doing a bit of research on you. Originally documented as Quirkless, accepted into UA on your grades alone, which is quite a feat in itself. It was your performance in the physical exams that made you stand out to me. A Quirkless child has no power to destroy that robot in the manner you did. In a strikingly similar manner to one other student, taking the same exam as you. I was just as surprised as you, sir, you answered, and he only paused to process that for a moment before he opened the file to skim through the papers. Judging by the words you could see as they shuffled around, they were about you. Somehow, he'd even gotten a hold of your student records. Here's where I stumbled. Night-Eye turned a single sheet of paper to you, the one that showed your scores on the UA exam, as well as the extra notes added about your injuries, the shattered arm and collarbone, fractured ribs from the fall, lacerations and bruising. All Might didn't choose you as his successor, that much is for certain. That fool was dead set on Midoriya Izuku. So, how did you end up with One for All? At first, I thought it had been passed on to you from All Might's original candidate choice, but that was quickly disproven when I saw his own sports festival matches. Midoriya Izuku still had One for All in some capacity, that is certain. Night-Eye waited a long moment for you to scan the paper, and still sat in silence as he pulled it away from your gaze and waited for a response. Your brain racked with the right course of action, but Night-Eye already knew all this after using his quirk on you, right? Why was he asking for this confirmation when he'd been given all the proof he needed? You voiced your concerns, lifting your eyes to look at him. You know the answer to that, don't you? Something happened. I don't know what or even how, but Midoriya Izuku became my soulmate the second he got One for All from All Might, and when I became his soulmate, I got One for All too. Please don't ask me how, I really don't know how it worked. It's something I've thought about. So, there's 2 instances of One for All in the world, now. I think just one, you responded quickly, and your hands laid in your lap fidgeting. You had a hangnail on your left index finger, and it suddenly seemed very interesting. There's a lot I don't know about One for All. I don't even know how it's really passed on. By ingesting the DNA of the current holder, Night-Eye answered easily. If you offered that DNA with intent and the person taking it also accepted it, it would be passed on to the receiver. Some portion is left over. That's how All Might has continued to work despite passing it on to Midoriya. Has he not explained any of this to you? All Might, he meant. You shook your head once. No, I don't. I don't think it's crossed either of our minds that I could potentially pass it on. Night Eye's finger tapped against the desk a few times, his eyebrows furrowed behind his glasses as he spoke. It's something you should bring up when you see him next. If you could pass on one for all through your own actions. He didn't need to finish his sentence, you knew what he was insinuating. Before he could ask you more questions you had no real answer to, you finally brought up one of your own. Sir, if I may? Yes. Do you have an answer for why? Why you received it too? No, I don't. I have some theories, but the only real way to test them is out of the question and would involve passing one for all through the hands of numerous, quirkless people. No, there's no concrete answer. Please, what's that theory? Your fists clenched in your lap as you felt desperation curl in your heart. Maybe if you had an explanation, or even the ghost of one, you wouldn't feel so apprehensive when you thought of the bond you shared with Midoriya. Night Eye seemed threw off by your question, but he recovered quickly enough that you almost didn't catch it. Like I said, unless it's something tested, it's not concrete, but perhaps you and Midoriya had been soulmates all along, but without the indicator to show you, you couldn't know. Perhaps everyone has a soulmate, but being born quirkless turns it into a truly invisible bond. Your breath left your lungs in a long exhale, one that shook from your lips as you closed your eyes. You weren't sure if that was the answer you were expecting, but it made sense. Of course, it did, because you couldn't think of anything else that could give reason to why you were saddled with this important gift. Another subject change, this time in the form of Night Eye closing your file and tucking it back into the drawer in his desk. Turning back to you, he folded his hands together on the desk and leveled you with a stern stare. I brought you here because I expected to face some bumbling fool. You're nervous, but not an idiot. Looking at your future, and speaking to you directly, I can see that you're only trying to make the best of what you've been forced into. You have a conviction despite your original unwillingness, and I can admire that. Thank you, sir. This week will be difficult for you. I understand. You came here to learn, and I will teach you so long as you continue to hold the conviction that brought you down this path. I won't tolerate any slacking off. Yes, sir. Go find Mirio, bring him here. We'll get started immediately. Getting started, unfortunately, meant sitting through Bubble Girl, Centipeder, and Night Eye going over the fledgling details of a case they were piecing together. Drags were being moved through one of the nearby district's internationally illegal substances, and they were going to pinpoint the source. Quirk-enhancing drags had been banned in almost every country due to the instability of them, and a new breed had begun to pop up within certain circles. Night Eye had been very firm that you were here to observe, so if any true combat happened during this investigation, you'd immediately be taken out of the fight. Of course, since this was the beginning stages, he didn't foresee any true altercations taking place. Mirio. Yes, sir. Take them with you on patrol this afternoon. Show them the ropes. You can count on me. Let's go, buddy. Mirio was surprisingly good at explaining things, despite being a total dork. After changing into his costume, he met you outside the agency and laid out the route he'd be following that afternoon. Since he had his provisional license and was doing a work study through Night Eye's agency, he was allowed to use his quirk during hero work. You were just an intern, you couldn't even wear your costume in public yet. I'll be able to handle anything we come across, no sweat. He promised, striding confidently in front of you as he pointed out different aspects of patrols and the best ways to spot and apprehend criminals. During the day it's easier, you won't find as much trouble. Of course, that just means if they're doing dirty deeds during the day, they're dastardly devils. His alliteration seemed to tickle him because he let out a genuine laugh after that goofy sentence, and he turned to start walking backwards so he could see you as he spoke. Alleyways and dark places are the usual spot, but you should keep an eye out everywhere. Crime can make a home in any shadow. Our job is to make sure we're bright enough to cast those shadows out and reveal the truth. We should be giving hope to those who have none and bolster the ones who do. Our presence is important for the public to see, and that's the #1 reasons for patrols. To show that we're here and we're ready to take on anything that threatens our society. He was surprisingly good at motivation. Despite being apprehensive when you first left the agency, you felt more confident when Mirio's words alighted on you. He truly was a hero, and you could foresee him becoming one of the best given time. Vaguely, he reminded you of All Might, and you couldn't help the small thought in the back of your head that there was more to his presence at Night Eye's agency than simply his potential. Once Night Eye heard that your commute to and from the agency every day would be almost 2 hours each way, he'd been nice enough to spring for a capsule hotel for the week nearby. It was surprisingly generous, but after you'd returned from your patrol with Mirio and got to do some actual training, you came to find that he was a genuinely nice person, despite the prickly exterior. Since silence was requested once you entered the hallway with the capsules, you instead stood outside the hotel with a custard taiyaki in your hand and held your phone to your ear. It rang a few times, and just as you were about to hang up, a breathless voice answered the phone. "Hi. Sorry I almost missed you." "It's okay, Midoriya," you assured him, and after finishing the bite of food you'd taken, you teased him just a bit. "How come you're always out of breath on the phone? Did I catch you at a bad time?" "No. I just finished up some training." Midoriya sounded awfully defensive about it, but you didn't have any reason to not believe him. He was a hard worker, that's probably exactly what he was doing. Before you could say anything, he beat you to the punch. "How's your day gone so far? Are you settling in okay?" "Yeah, Sir Night Eye's a really good teacher. I went on patrol with one of the others today, and then when we got back Night Eye took us through some exercises and had us spar without quirks." It really shed light on how much the third-year work studies push you forward. Work studies? Oh, does Night Eye had another student there doing that? That's great, you guys must be getting along then. Midoriya sounded a bit off-put, and something in you rushed to try and rectify that. Against what your brain was telling you, it seemed your heart got to control your mouth instead. "Yeah. I miss you, Midoriya. It'll be weird not seeing you all week." A sharp intake of breath was his response, and you almost thought he hung up due to the following silence on the line. Shakily, his voice came through like he was embarrassed or trying not to cry, or something that Midoriya normally did when he was faced with something he was unsure about socially. "I miss you too. You get back on Saturday?" "Saturday night, yeah," you answered, shifting the phone to hold it between your cheek and shoulder and used the now free hand to pull at the crust of your taiyaki. "Listen, Midoriya. When we get home, there's something I need to talk to you about." "Things." Midoriya sounded nervous, and going over your previous sentence you realized that it sounded ominous. Hurriedly you answered him. "Nothing bad, I promise. It's still serious." Quietly he said your name, and you hummed in response. Midoriya hesitated before speaking. "I have to go, Gran Torino is calling for me, but I just wanted to say That pause felt heavy, and you could swear that you knew what he was about to say. You'd been dreaming of it since you made it known to him you were his soulmate, since he confessed to you his feelings without that knowledge. The paper around your taiyaki crinkled with the tensing of your hands, the anticipation making you feel strangely excited and nauseous at the same time. Then, like a rubber band releasing, the moment was gone when you heard a shout in the distance from Midoriya's end of the call. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "Okay, bye. I'd like to see your quirk." You stared openly at Night Eye as he stood nonchalantly in the doorway. You just finished your morning routine with Mirio, which usually consisted of a set of generic stretches before some basic sparring and exercises. It wasn't much different than what you did at UA, but the sparring seemed to help immensely. Mirio was surprisingly good at spotting flaws, even after you'd done some training with All Might. "I'm not sure that's a good idea to do here, sir." "I've already thought of that, yes. We'll be going out of the city today. Bubble Girl and Centipeder will handle the agency in our absence." You couldn't argue, he seemed dead set on watching you. Use one for all. Night Eye corralled the two of you into what you assumed was his personal car, a plain black thing, completely nondescript, and the trip out of the city took upwards of an hour. Under his permission, you were allowed to wear your costume for this. You weren't going to lie, it made you feel just a bit more confident when you stepped out of the car. The area he drove you to was wooded, and he had taken a rarely beaten path to get here. Mirio seemed to be buzzing with excitement, since the only time he'd seen you use your quick was on the television during the sports festival. However, you weren't so confident anymore, since a particular thought wedged into the front of your brain. Sir Night Eye? I can't completely control it yet. Is there medical nearby? Unfortunately, no. You'll just have to watch yourself. You've done it without hurting yourself badly before, you'll have to do it again. The clearing is filled with boulders, bring them down if you can. Of course, you could, hopefully not while also bringing yourself down in the process. Mirio cheered something as you selected your first target, a large rock on the opposite side of the open area. On the utility belt of your costume was a pair of gloves, and you pulled them on with trembling hands. Why were you so nervous? You've done this before. Just use a little. Use what you need, not what you want. Just like All Might showed you, your legs spread into a slightly crouched, wider stance that could compensate for the kickback of power. Loosen your shoulders, bring your fist back to a comfortable distance. Keep your wrists straight, use the flat area between your second and third knuckle to help spread the impact. It was almost like he was standing over you as you went over this checklist, making sure you were setting up for the best chance of success. Lifting weights was one thing, but fighting with One for All was something you weren't so confident with. But you needed to be, this time, familiar. Like breathing, you inhaled as you reached for One for All. At once, it thrummed through your veins, and instead of directing it, you let it swim through to the very tips of your fingers and toes. In the corners of your vision, you could see that your arms weren't trembling. Good, you hadn't gone too far yet. A little more, you reasoned, plucking at that vast well inside of you. It felt like it did during training, when your muscles sang with the power thrumming through them. This boulder was nothing. There was a mountain in the distance that you reasoned you could probably punch a hole through if. Get a hold of yourself, you admonished as you ped that fist a little tighter before letting out a vicious yell. In the split second before your fist connected with the rock, you could almost hear the roaring of a crowd, the pained yell of Yayorozu when your fist connected with her diaphragm, the blood rushing in your ears. When the dust cleared after a few long moments, the boulder was gone and your arm thrummed with energy, but nothing else. No pain, nothing broken. A bit of adrenaline kept you up, but you knew it wasn't hiding agony behind it. Only the feeling of One for All in your veins was what you felt. Do it again. Another and another. Each one fell before your fists. You found yourself having to pull at more of One for All with each one, the original amount you had siphoned not being enough to last through multiple uses. That brought an interesting thought. What if you pulled all of it out but only released it bit by bit in your punches? Would you be able to control it that easily? In this moment, probably not. The clearing had once been filled with boulders, but now it only held 3 figures, you, panting heavily over the remains of your last obstacle. Mirio was standing with a slackened jaw, his hands limp at his side. Night Eye looked interested, but otherwise unruffled. Slowly, you trudged your way back to them and took a better look at Night Eye's face. He looked impressed. It made something in your chest swell with pride when he nodded once. You have a good handle on it. Better than the festival, certainly. It's thanks to All Might. He's been training you personally? Mirio seemed surprised, and you honestly forgot he was here in your haze of confidence. Night Eye shot you a look, and you realized you needed to come up with something quick. Yeah. I asked him for some extra tutoring. My quirk, it's hard to handle, but it's similar to his, so he's been showing me how he does it. It's helped a lot. He's one of our teachers, after all. Oh, right. Mirio clapped a palm to his forehead before smiling. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm a bit jealous. All Might's been one of my idols. I bet he's taught you all kinds of tricks. We mostly just lift weights and move things around, you said a bit sheepishly, and that seemed to suffice, because Night Eye cut back in. How much can you lift? Well, it just depends on how much I'm using. I usually only use less than 5% of my quirk's power, otherwise I get hurt pretty badly. If I'm using it comfortably, maybe 6,000 pounds? At least, that's the heaviest All Might had brought in for you to work with. After that, you'd run out of plates in the training room, and that was the last time you trained with him. Still, saying it out loud felt surreal. A few months ago, you were quirkless. Now you were punching boulders to dust and bench-pressing elephants. It made your head spin how quickly your life had changed in such a short time. Night Eye seemed to notice that your thoughts were taking a strange turn, and he laid a hand on your shoulder to snap you out of it. You did well today. I'd like to speak to you alone, Mirio. Head back to the car, we'll be there in a few moments. Sounds good, sir. Mirio left quickly, leaving you alone with Night Eye in the now decimated clearing. The only sound for a few heartbeats was the wind moving through the leaves in the trees, punctuated by the few birds that had returned after your cacophonous activity. There is only one true instance of one for all in the world, that much I'm certain of, Night finally said, letting his hand fall from your shoulder as he took a step closer to one of the nearby boulders you destroyed. Thoughtfully, he brought a thumb to his lip before he continued, seeing your quirk in action, I can really only compare it to one for all in name and function. Beyond that, the energy in the air felt nothing like All Might. That wasn't what you were expecting. Before you could question it, Night Eye continued, All Might's power is flashy, with a crackling energy in the air that inspires those around him into action as well. With you, it was quiet, like it was contained to you and you alone. That may be attributed to you not using it to its entirety, but I surmise that even if you were using one for all at 100%, it would feel the same, a focused assault, single-minded in your approach to the obstacle. Calculated and precise. But it's still one for all. Maybe, or it may just be an offshoot allowed to you because Midoriya Izuku has been your soulmate for your entire life, and to bring you together it used your bond to supply you with a quirk of your own. Did you really think that? Of course not, it's a flight of fancy. Night actually scoffed at this and turned to you, I don't know why you have one for all, but you do have it. Seeing your work today has solidified it in my mind. All Might chose Midoriya to be his successor, and you were an unexpected accessory. What do you plan to do with your future? He had to have seen this, but maybe he only looked forward enough to see your conversation the other day. You looked up at him as he approached, and his expression was unreadable as he stopped a few feet away. Somehow, you felt this answer would solidify quite a lot in the future and had quite a bit residing on it. But what did you want? Becoming a hero hadn't been on your agenda, but here you were in the hero course learning how to do it. Using one for all hadn't been something you wanted, but every use of it brought an exhilaration you'd never felt before. Having a soulmate was something you were sure you'd spurned, but the moment he asked what your future was planned to become, you had a single answer that bubbled from your mouth. Midoriya. If he's going to be the next symbol of peace, then I want to help him with that in any way possible. If that means I have to become a hero, then I'll do my best. It is not so hard to widen a path once it has been laid. So, your future revolves around him? That's unfortunate. Not just him, you interrupted and took a step forward to accentuate your words. I didn't want this at first. I hated it. I thought Midoriya was a burden and one for all were the chains that kept me tied to him, but I'm starting to see the things I can do with it, the ways I can help that seemed ridiculous to me before. Midoriya might be my main reason for becoming a hero, but having one for all means that I have the ability to help people and make them smile when they don't think they can anymore. It's my responsibility, even if it's just some offshoot like you said. Night Eye's previous indifference to your answer turned to one of interest as his eyebrows rose. The wind moved over the clearing again, shifting the trees and blowing some of the dust in the air. Night Eye stepped past you, moving in the direction that the car had been parked. That will have to be enough. Blearily, you reached into the folds of your blanket to find your phone, the buzzing noise having woken you from your sleep. In the darkness of your capsule, it was hard to make out what was printed on the bright screen, but a few moments of adjusting the settings of your phone made it easier to read the message. Well, to see it, there wasn't much to read. It was just a location sent to you from the last person you expected, Midoriya. You sent a question mark, and after a minute or two with no answer, the anxiety that bubbled in your chest made itself known and you slid out of the capsule without a sound, despite the rushing in your ears. Without paying any mind to the fact you were in your pajamas, you grabbed your wallet with your transit card and slid on the cheap sandals provided by the hotel for their guests. You had no more time to waste, something in you was screaming to get to the location he sent you. The receptionist at the front looked at you strangely, then called out as you practically sprinted by her, your footsteps accentuated by the obnoxious flopping of the foam sandals. You ignored her, instead bursting through the front door and turning to the right to where you remembered the closest train station being located at. At the end of the block, a lone figure stood, hands in their pockets and very obviously standing in your way. Your brain immediately told you to get ready for a fight, but you snapped out of that train of thought quickly when you nearly tripped over your sandals in an effort to stop just short of bowling the man over. Sir? Are you a fool? What? You blurted, and Night Eye pulled one hand out of his pocket to push his glasses up. The moon had been reflecting off them perfectly, hiding his eyes. Now, they were in plain sight, and he looked as furious as you'd ever seen him. I asked, are you a fool? Running off in the middle of the night? Do you expect to take down some villains in sandals and a tank top? No. But Midoriya sent you his location. Yes, I'm aware. Right, he must have seen this in your future one the first day. Of course he did. But why bother to stop you? Us. He was supposed to. Were you supposed to turn around? Undoubtedly he's told someone about it, or he saw far enough to see that things turned out fine, but this was giving you a headache. Are you here to stop me? The only answer you could come up with was that one, and Night Eye nodded once while returning his hand to the pocket of his slacks. Of course, you're not meant to go there, I've seen it, and what I see is unavoidable. I've alerted the proper authorities, but it seems they've already got a handle on things in Hosu. Everything will turn out fine. All you can do is turn around and go back inside. But stop, Night Eye warned, and once more taking his hand from his pocket, he gestured to the way you'd come from. I understand your reasoning, I do. Midoriya is precious to you, but there's no reason for you to rush into this when you have to part in it. Go back. Everything is under control. I wouldn't lie to you about this. No, he wouldn't, especially since he knew the stakes you had invested in it. It didn't help with your worry, but the tension in your shoulders released as you turned a half step away. Night Eye let out a sigh as you finished that turn, and called after you during your walk of shame, your bravery is admirable, despite being misplaced. You have no need to worry tonight. His attempts at comfort didn't do much to help you, and you didn't sleep that night in favor of staring at the news articles flooding in from Hosu City. Midoriya's call the following afternoon was a godsend. Still, despite your secret elation, you let out a long-suffering sigh on the phone as he finished explaining that he was safe in the hospital and wasn't too hurt beyond normal. Night Eye had allowed you a break from training, and you used it to curl up in one of the empty offices to hold the phone to your chest and listen to him on speakerphone. Midoriya, didn't I tell you to be more careful? You did. But I couldn't just not help. If I hadn't, Ida would be. Midoriya cut himself off with a choked noise, and you knew that pushing more than this wouldn't help anything. Instead, you sighed again and hung your head. You couldn't lecture him too badly. If Night Eye hadn't intervened, you were going to run into that same danger after him. I know. Don't want you to get hurt, that's all. I'm glad everyone came out of it okay. Todoroki and Ida are both doing fine. Yeah, a bit beat up but otherwise good too. Midoriya paused and a shuffling sound came before the screen on your phone lit up. You lifted it to see that he was requesting to turn the voice call into a video call, and you quickly accepted it and held your phone so he could see you. Midoriya was laying in a hospital bed, a bruise blooming across his cheek but otherwise looking pretty healthy. As soon as he saw you, his cheeks turned a nice shade of pink and he smiled brightly. It's good to see you. Yeah, you too, you answered almost too quickly, and you covered up your nervousness with a smile. You're looking better than I expected. You do. I mean, I always think you look good, expectations or not, and breathe, you interrupted him, and he took a big gulp of air before he snapped his eyes shut with a queasy expression. Before you could stop it, a laugh burst out from your mouth and you couldn't help the smile. I'll be heading home tomorrow afternoon. Do you want to meet up? For dinner or something, I mean? Yes. Absolutely. His quick response obviously embarrassed him, because he reined it in and averted his eyes. I missed you. I missed you too, Midoriya. Hey, can I ask you something? His question was blurted out, probably before he could lose the courage, but that didn't stop his face from turning red again as he very pointedly avoided looking at the phone. Still, you hummed an assent, and he continued, "Do you think you could just call me Izuku? You know, if it's not too personal or anything." I know you wanted to take it slow, but I really think. Of course, Izuku. He was hooked up to a heart monitor, and it made your insides melt when you heard it stutter in response to your words. You found yourself leaving the agency on the last day with a bit more spring in your step than when you entered. You felt as if you'd really made progress this week. To your surprise, Night Eye pulled you to the side before you left the agency to return to your home and gave you a letter to bring back to you. A letter of recommendation, he said. Should the opportunity arise, he wanted you to return for a work-study as soon as you received your provisional license. You understood it was a great honor and thanked him profusely as you left, maybe a bit too enthusiastically, judging by the eye roll you saw as the door closed. Mirio offered to walk you to the station and stood with you on the platform as you waited the next few minutes for the train to arrive. Other people milled about, their voices making a nice white noise to get lost in. You weren't allowed that luxury for long, because Mirio piped up, gesturing at the letter you held protectively in your hands. He likes you, you made a good impression. Sir's a bit prickly, but I'm glad he's taken to you. I think we came to an understanding, you agreed, and Mirio's laughter was his response as soon as the train rolled in. Gathering your bags, you turned to him with your free hand out. Thanks for everything this week, Mirio. You've been a good partner. Of course. I'll see you back at school, maybe we can train together there too. You agreed, and after a quick handshake, you hurried onto the train to find your seat. You were excited to get home, the knowledge that Midoriya was waiting for you making the butterflies in your stomach come to life. Midoriya texted you the address of where he would meet you, and a quick search revealed that it was a smaller shop that specialized in more traditional foods. His favorite food was katsudon, that was probably why he picked it. He hadn't arrived yet, so you stood outside and scrolled through news articles, absorbing the information that the public was made aware of when it came to that business in Hosu City concerning the hero killer. It shook you a little bit when Midoriya told you about his run-in with the guy, but it seemed like he really only came out of it with a few scrapes and bruises, so you counted your blessings, and his. Enraptured by your phone, you didn't realize you had company until a hand laid on your shoulder to get your attention. Turning on your heel, you were relieved to see that it was Midoriya, dressed in a plain black hoodie and jeans, those god-awful shoes clashing with his outfit. Ignoring that, you took a quick step forward to throw your arms around him in a hug. You dork, don't get caught up in things like that again, alright? I can't really promise that, but I'll try. Midoriya was unsure as his hands came you rest on your waist to hold you there. I am happy to see you too. I'm happy to see you in one piece. You corrected him as you pulled away, a stern frown on your features. This didn't seem to dissuade him, and he only let out a nervous laugh in return before grabbing your hand to bring you inside the building. There were a few tables scattered around, but it was mostly bar seating, so you took the ones on the far end to have a bit of privacy. After a moment, you heard Midoriya's stool creak a bit as he tried to subtly move it a bit closer to you. He stopped a few inches away, and you took the initiative to move your stool the last bit to press the outside of your thigh against his. He didn't seem to be complaining. Dinner went by quickly. He ordered katsudon like you expected, and he told you all about how he managed to get a hold on One for All during his training with Gran Torino. You also regaled him with your tales at Naitai agency, especially your training sessions with him and Mirio and how much you felt you. Midoriya insisted on walking you home, and things were relaxed and calm until you got to the front gate of your house. That was when he stopped you from entering by grabbing your elbow. Wait. What's wrong? Your quick answer startled him, and he seemed to mull over his words for a minute before deciding on the next ones to let out. You said on the phone you had something you wanted to talk about. Remember? The first day of our internship. Oh yeah, that. You remembered even though you wanted to put it off a little bit more. You hadn't lied to him, it wasn't anything bad. Instead, it would probably make him happy, but the thought of revealing something so emotional felt like it was strangling you. Sir Night Eye and I talked about some things, the first day of the internship. It came up a few times after. You explained, deciding to start slow with this particular topic. Sir knows about One for All, and he told me some things I need to ask All Might about, but also brought up some interesting thoughts. Interesting? How so? Well, you paused and looked at where his hand slid down from your elbow to hold your hand instead. Absently you squeezed it. He brought up why I was given one for all too. And there's no way to prove it, but I want to believe the theory that we were meant for each other even before all this quirk stuff. You mean? Yeah, that we've always been soulmates, and it's not just something that popped up the moment you took the quirk. But it's just been invisible since we had no indicator, and I want to believe that. Midoriya looked at you with large, watery eyes for a long moment. Then, before either of you could react, those tears fell over his cheeks and he hurriedly started to wipe at them with the sleeve of his hoodie. Why are saying you think we've been made for each other this whole time? That's what I think, yeah. You took a step forward and reached up with the sleeve of your own sweater to wipe at his cheek. It makes sense, at least to me. If we weren't meant to be from the start, why would I feel this way about you so easily? The noise Midoriya made was choked as his face scrunched up, moment before he stepped forward to pull you into a hug and bury his face in your neck. His shoulders shook with his sobs as he curled against you, and you tried to soothe him with rubbing your hands along the curve of his upper back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry, Izuku. The mention of his given name made him let out another sob, and the feel of his fingers curling into the muscles of your back punctuated his next words. You're not at fault, It's so relieving to hear that. I always felt like there was someone out there for me, but without a quirk how would I know? And then you showed up and it's like I knew, I've always known. You hummed against him, supported his weight easily as he leaned into your hold. The first time I saw you, outside the school that day, I couldn't stop thinking about you. You felt so familiar, it was like I was seeing the sun after living in the dark. I knew then, you told him quietly, bringing a hand up to run through the back of his hair. I knew you were my soulmate when we met each other that day. Before that moment, I didn't want anything to do with you, but I felt that same way. Maybe Night I was right, and it's been like this all along. Midoriya's eyelids fluttered, his lashes brushing against your neck as the tension in his shoulders melted. Thank you for giving us a chance. It's all I've really wanted. Just as much as being a hero, I wanted to have someone I could cherish and protect. You wanted to share that sentiment, but up until recently you were so against the idea. All you could do was nod and lean your cheek against his as he nestled into your collarbone, and I'll cherish and protect you too. You know, for originally being so against it, you're taking to the hero thing pretty quickly. Shinsu's teasing was almost comforting after having not seen him for so long. With your internship and then all the work you were putting in after school to catch up with your classmates, it made it difficult to make time for your closest friend. He didn't seem to mind too much, but he was insistent that the two of you meet up at the shopping center near UA to get some quality time. Quality time being him teasing you for the direction your life seemed to be taking now. Yeah, well, I don't know, I don't have a comeback for that. Shinso snorted, the air coming from his mouth traveling down the straw of his drink to blow a few bubbles before he quickly pulled it away. The two of you were sat in the food court, the wrappers of your lunch between you and a bag at your feet. It was the weekend, and you needed this after the hustle of the previous week's lesson plans at school. Finals were looming on the horizon, and Aizawa seemed dead set on working class 1A into the ground. I guess I'll just say, I told you so, and move on. Yeah, let's do that, you agreed despite the embarrassment of knowing that he was right about all of this tomfoolery you were going through. Getting to his feet, Shinso scooped up his own bag and waited for you to follow suit before the two of you moved on. With your needless shopping out of the way, the two of you wandered around a bit to delay going your separate ways. How are things with Midoriya? Better, now that things are out. Yeah, you cut yourself off at the feel of your phone vibrating in the front pocket of your hoodie. Shinso let out a laugh when he snooped at the screen and saw that the text message was from the exact person he asked about. Do you have plans tonight? Not really, but even if you did, consider them cancelled. You answered Midoriya with a negative, and his response came almost as soon as your message was sent. Do you want to come over tonight? For dinner? I want you to meet my mom. If you want to, answer him before he has a heart attack, stupid. Ah, right, you shook your head quickly and started to type an answer? Yes, of course you'd come over. Shinso seemed disproportionately pleased when he saw the shaking of your hand as you jammed it in your pocket along with your phone. He seemed to thrive on you being uncomfortable these days. So, I'm guessing things are going well. The rest of your afternoon was spent texting Midoriya and finishing your homework, and you may have told a white lie to your parents for your reasons for having dinner elsewhere that night. Shinso, you'd explained, and they accepted it without any fuss. They may have been quick to accept that you had a quirk somehow, but telling them you found your soulmate was going to send them to an early grave. No, you'd wait on that bit of information. It made you nervous to think about Midoriya and his mother's reaction. He had to have been in the same boat. Did he tell her about you? From what Midoriya's told you about his mother, she sounded like an absolute saint, and frankly that intimidated you. She sounded as sweet as Midoriya, and if she knew you had originally been unsure about her son, well, maybe she wouldn't be as saint-like as you expected. Midoriya texted you his address and what stop to get off on, but the former wasn't too important since Midoriya was adamant about meeting you at the station to walk with you to his home. You didn't question it too much. Midoriya had a deep-running protective streak even when it was unwarranted. The train to Midoriya's was unsurprisingly packed. He lived in a more modern neighborhood with a higher population density compared to your older neighborhood of machiya houses and quiet shrines. Getting off on his stop was a breath of fresh air, though still crowded. Midoriya seemed to anticipate this, and his message claimed he would be waiting out on the sidewalk for whenever you arrived. True to his word, he leaned against the wall with his phone clutched in both hands, eyes staring at the screen like he would burn a hole in it. A bit sheepishly, you remembered that you were supposed to message him when you got off the train, and in your haste you'd forgotten. Instead, a bit deviously, you approached and tugged his phone from his hands. With a yelp, he reached for it quickly, but you decided that a game of keep away was in order and you spun so your back was to him so you could look at what he was so engrossed in. You expected your messenger window, but the truth shocked you into stillness. His hands hurriedly came around your right side to take the phone back, but you'd already seen. Izuku. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be weird, or... Is that my profile picture? Weiss. Midoriya cut himself off, and you immediately felt bad because he looked like he was about to either implode with embarrassment or explode in tears. You wanted none of that, so you reached out to his shoulder to get his attention. It's not weird, you tried to soothe him, but he still wouldn't look at you. Instead, his eyes were trained firmly across the street at nothing in particular, so you sidestepped so you were in his field of vision. You saved it. It's a good picture. It's not weird, you reaffirmed, squeezing your fingers around his shoulder once before letting your touch smooth down his arm toward his hand where your fingers curled against his. The tension in his shoulders loosened, but he still had that watery look in his eyes, so you continued, I think it's kind of cute, actually. In fact, you trailed off and used your free hand to pull your phone out and pressed the side button to illuminate the lock screen. When you turned it to him, the sound he made was strangled as he realized what your wallpaper was. See? I have pictures of you too. This one's my favorite. How could it not be? You'd taken it stealthily a few days back when the two of you were riding to school together on the train. You'd said something that made his cheeks turn just the slightest shade of pink, and his mouth was upturned in a smile that you couldn't help but capture. Midoriya seemed elated at this, though he didn't mention it out loud. He didn't need to, you could feel that happiness radiating off him as you let him guide you down the street in the direction you figured his house was in. No conversation flowed, but it didn't need to. At least, until he got to the last block before his house, if you remembered your quick Google Maps search correctly. Once you rounded the corner, he stopped and tugged on your hand to get you to do so as well. His nervousness seemed to be back, though it didn't seem to be debilitating because his next words came quickly. I haven't told her about us. I just mentioned that we were all friends, and she suggested that you come over. Oh, that's kind of relieving, I guess. I was worried she'd hate me for not. We agreed we weren't going to bring it up anymore, remember? Midoriya admonished you with a small smile and a squeeze of his hand before his face went to worry again, but I thought it might be a good time to tell her with both of us there. You want to tell your mom now? Panic must have bled into your voice, because it was Midoriya's turn to do the comforting as he stepped forward to grab your other free hand in his, now holding both tightly, only if you want to. We can still just act like normal, we don't have to bring it up. I think it would be better to just tell her, You interrupted, immediately hating those words but knowing they rang true. I don't want your mom to be upset because we tried to hide it. I think she deserves to know. Yeah, I agree. Midoriya's words came out a little breathlessly as his mouth turned upwards into that smile again, the freckles on his cheeks crinkling just so at the motion. It'll make her happy. She'll love you, I know it. You didn't want to be so confident about it, but Midoriya seemed so sure that you couldn't help but hitch yourself a bit higher as you started to walk again. Midoriya lived in an apartment building. His mom was stay-at-home, while dad was out of the country for work. A few flights up, and you found yourself at a front door he was unlocking. The placard on the front was engraved with his last name, but you didn't have time to dwell on it before the door opened and Midoriya called into the apartment that he was home. Following his lead, you slipped your shoes off into the Genkan and arranged them neatly facing the door like his, then down the short hallway to what looked like the main living area. In the kitchen was a shorter woman with a half-up hairdo in the same color as Midoriya's unruly mess of hair. When the two of you entered the room, her eyes lit up over her shoulder and she turned to face you completely. God, she was adorable. A pale blue apron was tied around her waist, and she hurriedly wiped her hands on it before offering one of them for you to shake. Aren't you just something to look at? I'm Inko, Izuku's mother. With a shake of her hand and a respectful bow, you introduced yourself as Midoriya's friend and classmate. Inko turned back to the kitchenette to grab a covered pot, and you shared a look with him that indicated he should be the one to bring up your situation. Nervously, he nodded, then showed you where you could sit at the table as he helped his mother bring over dinner. Izuku tells me that you just transferred into the hero course earlier this month. That sounds exciting. I remember seeing your match on the television. You were so impressive. Thank you, Mrs. Midoriya. Your awkwardness was fading rapidly in the face of her motherly smile, and as the three of you finally settled in with your food, you tried to anticipate when it would come to a screeching halt. Not as long as you expected, unfortunately. So, Mom, I actually have something to tell you. What is it, sweetheart? Well, I'm Izuku's soulmate, you blurted, and much like when you confessed it to him for the first time, you wanted to put those words right back in your mouth. Midoriya was staring at you with wide eyes, a little relief shining in them, and Inko was staring at you with wide eyes of her own. Hers were unreadable, but she didn't seem angry. Are you sure? Very sure, Mom, Midoriya said without hesitation, and after letting those words settle in the air, he reached for your hand sitting on the table near his. Inko's eyes zeroed in on that interaction, and the tears welling in her eyes threw you off. You vaguely registered that this must be where Midoriya got his penchant for crying from. That's just good news. I never expected this kind of news, I'm sure you understand. Inko turned to you at that last part, and you nodded once. Of course, you understood. You didn't expect this news when you realized it either. Inko bombarded the two of you with a flurry of questions. How did you meet? When did you realize? Have you kissed? That last part threw you off balance. But the next question came so quick that you didn't have time to even begin to tell Midoriya Inko that you hadn't even kissed your soulmate despite knowing him for, God, almost 4 months? But 3 of those months it wasn't even an accepted thing, but you weren't about to tell her that. Instead, you came up with a story on the fly that was mired in truth. You met at the beginning of the school year but didn't realize the two of you were soulmates until the day of the sports festival. Inko seemed a bit put off that you hadn't told her, but you explained that it was so sudden and neither of you expected it to be a possibility and wanted to sort it out for yourselves. That put her back at ease, and she seemed so cheerful at the fact her son even had a soulmate to begin with. Dinner went by between her questions about you and your life, and once your plates were cleared, she ushered you away from the kitchen with claims that she could handle cleanup and Midoriya should take you to see his room instead. This put him on edge, but he couldn't directly disobey his mother like that. So with defeated shoulders he turned to the door that clearly held his name on an all-might door hanger. If that made you think he was a fanboy, the room that greeted you when the door opened solidified that thought. Midoriya seemed to shrink in on himself as you passed him into the middle of the room and turned on the spot to take in everything. All-might posters, books, action figures, even his bedspread held the familiar red, white, and blue colors of his costume. You probably think I'm a dork. Oh yeah, definitely. But I like it. You turned to look back at him with a smile that you knew looked giddy, and at the sight of it he didn't look so embarrassed anymore. With a relieved sigh, you dropped to sit on the edge of his perfectly made bed and stretched your legs out in front of you. Are you sure? I know it's a little much, but… It's very you interrupted him, patting your hand on the bed so he would sit next to you. His eyes widened when he realized that you were sitting on his bed, and you couldn't help but wonder if you were the first person of a romantic nature that set foot in his room. Probably, judging by the flush of his face as he slowly sat down next to you. With another sigh, this one of contentment, you leaned your head against his shoulder. A comfortable silence settled over your shoulders, and absently you leaned just a bit closer, your arm pressed against his as you got settled. A quiet mumble of your name grabbed your attention, and you tilted your head up to look at him from where you leaned. His eyes were trained on his desk across from the two of you, and the pink that had been on his cheeks since you walked into his home had deepened to a redder hue. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. With us, I mean. I'm not, you assured him, and his lips were a bit wobbly as he lifted them into a smile before closing his eyes as if to center himself. That's really good. I thought maybe bringing you here would be too fast, but I'm glad things turned out this great. Me too. You turned your face forward to press your cheek into the muscle of his shoulder just a bit harder. I really like you, Izuku. Like you too. I just did a lot of training and followed them around on patrols. Still, I bet it was more exciting than you're making it out to be. I think your expectations are too high, you answered Ishido, and she groaned in irritation before turning to Tsu and her tales of helping her agency with a group of drag smugglers. That was enough to get the attention off you, and you were able to turn and listen to Kaminari gush over the hero killer. It made your blood run cold as you thought of what transpired. Sure, Night Eye had assured you that everything would turn out, but there was still that seed of doubt that festered until Midoriya called you to tell you he was just fine. Midoriya admonished Kaminari's admiration, especially when Ida appeared to stiffen up for only a brief moment before assuring everyone that it wasn't an issue. Almost instantly, Ida went from sullen and quiet to his usual boisterous self and instructed everyone to take their seats for class to begin. Aizawa arrived not a moment too soon, and class began with reminders that final exams were coming up quickly and everyone should really buckle down if they want to pass. Classes went by uneventfully for the rest of the day, up until the afternoon when hero training gathered out in one of the training grounds. It looked to be a factory setting, full of pipes and buildings that made for tricky terrain to navigate. All Might stood before the group with his trademark grin, exclaiming that today would be a special training exercise to see how the class had grown over their internships. You'll be competing in groups, and each person starts from a different location on the outskirts of the training ground. After I send a distress signal, you do what you must to rescue me. Whoever finds me first wins. A quick comment about property damage was directed at Bakugo, much to the amusement of the class, but there was no further fanfare as he announced the first group of students to take the race. The rest of the class took seats on the ground to watch the screen as the others took their places, and Yaoyorozu wasted no time in taking observations. Midoriya's at a heavy disadvantage here, the other four have great mobility. Not to mention every time he uses his quirk, he gets injured, Jair piped in from her spot on the ground next to Yaoyorozu. A few other bets went out, spread pretty evenly across the board against Midoriya, but you had a hunch that his training over the week had been more successful than they expected. When Kaminari asked your opinion, you weren't shy in your answer. I think as Midoriya's got this one. He's learned a lot this week, don't count him out yet. If you say so, but if he's in a heap on the ground at the end, you're the one carrying him to Recovery Girl, the blonde teased, just as the siren went off for the race to begin. The camera was split, showing everyone starting movements, and a few murmurs went around when it zoomed in on Midoriya launching through the air with an ease that looked like he'd done this a million times. Hey, aren't those Bakugo's moves? They did look familiar, but you brushed that off in favor of the swell of pride in your chest. He'd finally gotten a hold on things, and you couldn't be happier to see him like this. He really looked like he was in his element. Then he slipped. A few groans rang through the group as he hit the ground, and Siro won the race almost too easily. Kaminari leaned over to you with laughter in his voice. Guess he did end up in a pile on the ground. Shut it, Despite your urge to show off what you'd learned, you instead reined yourself in and settled for at least finishing the race, if not in first. A simple bit of your one for all used to augment your leg muscles to run along the ground faster than what would be normal was more than enough to net you a safe third place. Still, a part of you wanted to soar through the air weightlessly like Midoriya had done. After class finished for the day, you packed away your hero costume and spent a few minutes talking to the others before making your way to your locker. Midoriya said that he needed to talk to All Might after class and you didn't need to wait for him, but you insisted that you'd be sitting on the front steps waiting for him. Surprisingly, their meeting went quickly, and when Midoriya came to you he looked a bit perturbed about something. On seeing the expression on his face, you got to your feet and waited for him to get closer before asking what was bothering him. Midoriya looked at you for a long moment, as if searching your eyes for something, before he let out a long sigh. All Might explain some things to me. He said I should let you know too. You weren't expecting what came next. The creation of One for All and its purpose as a dichotomy for a villain named All for One. The responsibility that the holder of One for All had in serving the public, as well as defeating that villain. If things had gone different, that might have fallen solely on Midoriya's shoulders, but he said that I need to count on you, because everyone is counting on us. We need to stick together and grow stronger as a team. Midoriya looked frantic, like he wasn't sure if you were going to agree to all of this, despite you not having any real choice. You stared at him for a long moment, unsure of how to explain to Midoriya that a few weeks ago, you might have been fighting against this mantle that fell onto your shoulders so solidly, and maybe you should still be doing that. However, things had changed, and you finally started to feel that little bit of purpose that All Might told you about. We will, you finally assured him, and he practically melted in relief. If All Might fought this All for One and defeated him, and if he's convinced that he's going to come back again, we have an ace. This. As far as anyone knows, One for All is a singular quirk in the world. And now there's two. Exactly, you couldn't help but smile as you reached for his hand and squeezed it once. All Might was able to temporarily defeat All for One on his own. Think of what we could do between the two of us. We just have to get stronger. Together, Midoriya finished with that relieved smile again, his hand squeezing yours once in return. Thank you. If I had to do this alone. You won't be, you promised him, punctuating your words with a single nod. I'm not going anywhere. We're a team. Luckily, despite being in separate classes and courses, your main lessons coincided with Shinsu's and the two of you settled at the coffee table in your living room with books spread between the two of you. It was Saturday morning, and the two of you were cramming for finals that would be fast approaching Monday morning and lasting through the week. The two of you were in the midst of a short break before you started to go through your study sheets for algebra. Something on his cell phone was preoccupying him, so instead you took the chance to look at your own phone that had buzzed a few times in the past hour or so. Mom, don't forget to grab the groceries on the list, it's on the fridge. Izuku, good morning. Smiley face. Uraraka, can you send a pic of your note for Lesson 5 of Classical Japanese? You scrolled quickly back to Midoriya's message and tried to hide your smile. Even something as simple as a good morning message was enough to get your heart jumping to your throat. It was enough to be worrying if you had the chance to think about how far gone you were for this boy. You had plans with him later in the day, specifically pertaining to that grocery trip your mother mentioned. A few weeks ago, you recalled Midoriya mentioning offhandedly that there was something nice about doing mundane tasks like running errands with someone. The blush on his face as soon as he said it came to mind, and you had asked him last night if he wanted to go with you. A resounding yes was his answer. For a brief moment, your fingers hovered over the keyboard on your screen before you quickly typed your message and locked your phone before you could trip yourself up over it. Good morning to you too. List firmly in your pocket and empty bags looped over your shoulder, you waited patiently for that familiar green head of hair to round the corner at the end of the street. Midoriya hadn't acknowledged the kiss emoji you sent him earlier in the day, and you weren't sure if you wanted to take that as a small blessing or be anxious about it. He didn't seem upset through his later messages that said he would be here soon, but you were overthinking it. During your anxiety-induced trance, Midoriya had arrived and waved a hand in front of your face to snap you out of it. It took a moment before you jumped and looked at him with pink cheeks. Sorry, I was thinking about something? Yeah, I get that completely. Midoriya's voice was a little shaky and it matched his smile. It wasn't fake, but you could see something was making him nervous. If this had been a few months ago, you'd think it was just your presence, but Midoriya had more than enough time to get used to being around you at this point. Are you ready to go? You stood from your leaning position against the wall surrounding your front yard and stepped onto the sidewalk closer to Midoriya. His mouth opened and closed a few times before he put on another wavering smile and nodded once. Yeah. Do you shop around here? There's a greengrocer down the street we go to, come on. Like a switch, as soon as you started walking the conversation started to flow easily. Midoriya mentioned his study habits and asked if you wanted to go over some things tomorrow, and somewhere in the middle of that string of sentences his hand slipped around yours and weaved your fingers together. Your anxieties from earlier in the day melted. Maybe he just didn't see it? That had to be it. It was nice, actually. You could see what he meant by it being almost NTMT, discussing simple things like which bok choy was better, or whether your mom was too vague when she wrote down apples, and didn't specify a type. You went with red. Past the greengrocer's shop was a butcher that already had your order ready, and that was as simple as exchanging money and tucking the meat into its own bag. Midoriya offered to carry them for you, but you waved him off. My house isn't that far away. You can help me put stuff away though. His further protests were silent as you started your walk back down the street. At this time of day, there were quite a few people out running their errands as well, and it made for a nice background hum of noise that distracted you from your thoughts. Well, the noise and Midoriya holding your hand once more. It was a nice dichotomy, the feel of his calloused hand against your smooth one. He explained that it was from the training he was almost always doing either with All Might or at home, and even though he tried some lotions his mom kept picking up for him, it seemed like his hands were going to be like this from now on. It's not like you were complaining though. It was proof of his dedication to this hero gig, and even in times you felt doubt about it, you felt like you could look at him for a boost in morale. Things had changed so much in the past few months between the two of you, where before you were hesitant to tell him much of anything about yourself, now it was like he was the first person you could turn to in any situation. It seemed like that path that was built for one was already widening with each day. In your home, you went to the kitchen right away to put things away. Midoriya followed, and after hovering for a minute you told him to just put the meat in the freezer above your head while you kneeled at the fridge to somehow fit these DMN vegetables in this tiny space. You couldn't escape the thought that things were so different than what you had initially expected, and it felt good. Better than you could have hoped, or even asked for. Just being able to do something as simple as grocery shopping with your soulmate was something you could never have fathomed a year ago. Hey, Izuku? Why yeah? You crinkled the fabric bag in your lap for just a moment before you looked up at him. He was currently leaning over you, and from this angle he looked a bit silly, but you couldn't help but admire him even like this. The kitchen light centered behind his head made it look like he had some strange green halo, and your heart skipped a beat. Thank you. Oh, no problem. It's more fun with someone else. That's not what I meant, you interrupted him with a small laugh, but thanks for that too. Midoriya looked a bit puzzled as he put the last pork chop in the freezer and closed it. Then, what are you talking about? Sorry. Everything I guess? Giving me a chance after I botched this soulmate thing up the first time, being so supportive. Being with me. Everything. Midoriya's mouth set into a firm line, almost like he made up his mind about something, and in a split second he bent over and pressed his lips against yours. You were startled for a long moment, and it wasn't until he shifted to kneel next to you on the floor that you leaned into it and returned his gesture in earnest. Unlike his hands, his lips were so soft, and you wanted more of this, enough that you brought your hands up to cradle his chin and keep him from pulling away. If you could drown in this moment, you'd do it gladly. With a small groan, Midoriya pulled away and looked at you with wide eyes and flushed cheeks. His lips were a swollen pink that you only admired for a split second before you surged forward again and brought him into another kiss. And another and another.